All right, what's good? Drive time, Monday afternoon, 14 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is cold. It is gray because it's January in Utah. Almost halfway through January. We're going to get through it, kids, you and me together. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That young man is Porter Larson behind the glass today, producing this radio program that takes you until 6 o'clock tonight. In time for Monday Night Football. It should be a good one tonight as the weekend in pro football is behind us with some really good games and some games that were just so-so, but it will culminate tonight. The wild card weekend will wrap up with the Vikings and the Rams from Glendale, Arizona. This game was supposed to be played at SoFi, but it was moved as a result of the fires in the greater Los Angeles area. Of course, continuing to send good wishes and thoughts and all the good things to the folks in L.A. and the greater area that have been affected by just a horrible couple of weeks. But NFL moves to Glendale tonight at State Farm Stadium. Don't call it State Farm Arena. Minnesota is a 2.5-point favorite. That over-under is 47.5. Local boy Puka Nacua will be in action tonight. A lot of local guys making plays over the weekend. How about Bobby Wagner? That dude does not age. And a really, really fun story surfacing for the Washington Commanders is Jaden Daniels, and as a rookie quarterback, was able to go down to Tampa, take care of Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know that I've ever heard a more negative news cycle surrounding a team that won their playoff game rather comfortably as I've heard about the Philadelphia Eagles over the past, 16, 17 hours or so. The Packers were without like 5 offensive players. Jordan Love, Utah State alum, was playing without Christian Watson, lost a couple of other receivers, 2 offensive linemen. And I suppose if you're an Eagles fan, you want something more convincing, but they were never in danger of losing that game. After a slow start, the Bills undressed the Broncos at home. Ravens handled the Steelers on Saturday, then the Texans really took it to the Chargers. So we'll look back on the wild card weekend. We'll give you a bit of a divisional round preview, talk some NFL football on the show today. I want to give a big hug and congratulations to Mike McCarthy, who will escape Jerry's world and will not return as the Cowboys head coach in 2025. Since you and I last spoke, the New England Patriots have hired Mike Vrabel to try to bring them back to respectability, and we have the CFP final matchup between Ohio State and Notre Dame. So a lot to do on the show. The Utah Jazz continue to, at least from my standpoint, provide a little bit more excitement for the direction of the organization. And games recently have been either competitive or the Jazz have won. They sat like half their team against a bad Brooklyn Nets team. Brooklyn's kind of doing what Utah is doing, and the Jazz were able to get that win. And Isaiah Collier, after a horrific mistake in regulation, called for an 8-second violation, hits the game winner in overtime, and the Jazz beat the Brooklyn Nets. And that is their 3rd home win of the season. Am I reading that right? Oh, I know they had lost 9 straight games at home. Sorry, I don't mean to be pessimistic. I'm going to be nice about the Jazz. They got a night off tonight and tomorrow. They're back in action on Wednesday against the Hornets. So we'll do some NBA. We'll do some Jazz on the show. Can we get, I don't know if it's a standing O, but can we clap it out for the Utah men's basketball team? Can we give the Utes a little love today on a Monday afternoon for grabbing a Big 12 win over Oklahoma State here in Salt Lake at the Huntsman Center? BYU, whew. I mean, we knew Utah was going to struggle. BYU, audacious expectations according to some, and they are just off to a bad start. Watched the game over the weekend. They were on the road at TCU. BYU 1-3 in Big 12 play, 10-5 overall. This conference is nuts. It's really high-quality college basketball if you're into such things. So local landscape college basketball. Not a lot of local college football stuff. BYU picked up a good recruit over the weekend at the Senior Bowl. I was actually watching that game live and didn't realize I was about to stumble upon a news story. We'll tell you who that is. Keanu Tanavasa spoke to KSL, shedding some more light on his decision to leave Utah for BYU, but I think it's probably time to let that story die. I don't know how much meat is left on that bone, but good guest list on a Monday. It did feel like there was a little bit of a running back kind of retribution story over the weekend. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, James Cook. And we have an NFL running back on our show today. His name is Zach Moss. He's one of the best football players to ever play in the state of Utah and one of the best Utes of all time. Zach stops by today to talk a little NFL, some college. Stevenson Sylvester continues the conversation. Going to talk a lot of NFL with Sly today. Get his thoughts on the wild card round, what's ahead in the divisional round. Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office guy, will stop by. And then we're going to chat with Brian Dunseth. We were hoping to get an RSL front office member, and we will sooner rather than later because someone's got some explaining to do as RSL has jettisoned off most of its attacking 11 and 18, quite frankly, and a lot of holes to plug for this soccer club. So we'll see what Dunny has to say as Real Salt Lake sent Chicho Arango to San Jose for really pennies on the dollar. A lot of college football, a lot of NFL football, little NBA. Going to get you ready for a wild card, give you all the up-to-date news with the NFL coaching carousel, and good guest list with Zach Moss, Stevenson Sylvester, Bobby Marks, and Brian Dunseth. Me, Spence Checketts. Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, off to a great start to that work week. And that guy, Porter Larson, who is a Cowboys fan, and met today's news that Mike McCarthy is out with the emotion that is blank.
Obvious. Duh. I don't know exactly what
is duh an emotion?
I don't know.
It could be. I'm not judging.
And I don't really know where to fall with the emotions because this is something I've been asking for since before last offseason. And if you remember last offseason, there was a coaching market that involved Jim Harbaugh, Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, blah, 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 blah. You can go on and on about the coaches that were available last offseason. And it was obvious then, as obvious as it is today, that Mike McCarthy thing wasn't going to work. And so the Cowboys are now where we were when Jason Garrett got let go of. Nothing about what they've done in Jerry's world in the last decade inspires any confidence in me in the next step. But I'm hopefully optimistic. I'll just say that.
All right. Love to hear it. Our resident Cowboy fan, Porter Larson, on the program today. Jordan Love beat the Cowboys in the playoffs last year. Could not get that done this season. So we'll do some NFL. And Zach Moss is going to join us right out of the gates today. Before we get to Zach on this Monday afternoon, courtesy of our friends at Standard Restaurant Supply at your tailgate headquarters. Get everything you need to make your tailgate epic. Stop by their location at 3500 Southwest Temple or online at standardrestaurant.com. It's time now for your opening tip. I'm not making this a topic for the opening tip today. I'm just kind of observing that we've all lost our minds in this society. As of today, kids, you can go lay money down on the 2026 college national champion. That's right. We have odds. Texas is your favorite. Then it's Georgia and Ohio State. Both BYU and Utah right now are plus 10,000 to win the national championship next year. That puts them in the same stratosphere as North Carolina, Colorado, Illinois, Iowa State, Boise State, and that's the area that odds makers are telling you BYU and Utah exist in. It is so wild that in January of 24, we're able to put money down on the odds for the national champion 26. But we're not going to spend any time on that today outside of what we already have because it's irrelevant. All right, wild card weekend in the NFL. We'll wrap up tonight with a Monday Night Football game in Glendale, Arizona. It's been moved from Los Angeles. It's Minnesota, and it's the LA Rams. I think this is going to be a really good game. I don't think Minnesota is the right side here, but they are a 2.5-point favorite, and the spread is the over-under is 47.5. The line did move the way of the Vikings when it was taken away from the Rams as a home game. Obviously, local angle, Puka Nacua has had an incredible sophomore season after his historic rookie year. He battled some injuries, but little local flavor on the field tonight. A lot of local flavor over the weekend in pro football. And, I wanted to hone in a little bit on what I perceive to be a really odd reaction to the win that the Eagles had over the Packers. Now, I like Jalen. I think I like him more than most, but I understand at times you're watching an offense that has two super elite wideouts in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and a top shelf tight end now that Dallas Goedert is now healthy. That touchdown catch he had was incredible. And the Packers started the game without Christian Watson. Then they lost Jaden Reed, and they even lost Josh Jacobs, who had an insanely effective game. So they were down 6 offensive starters. And, of course, I cheer for our local guys. Britton Covey, who unfortunately is on the injured reserve, is an Eagle, and Jordan Love played his college ball at Utah State, so hoping to see Jordan have a better game, and he struggled, but he didn't have time to throw it, and he didn't have 3 of his top 5 offensive weapons, maybe 4 of his top 6. So I get why you watch the Eagles and maybe want more from Jalen. Like, you win the turnover battle by 4, and you're up 16-10 in the fourth, and you only throw for 131 yards. Saquon went for 119, 25 carries, 119 yards. Could have been like 170 with a touchdown, but he decided to just kind of hit the turf after he broke that last run in the fourth quarter, where pay dirt was there, but he just decided to fall down and win the game. And I get it from a team standpoint, smart thing to do. Your boy may have been playing a DraftKings lineup with Saquon as the captain. Wouldn't have minded. Saquon decided to go get that 6, nonetheless. But ultimately, Philly, to me, look, they're not Kansas City, and I'm starting to feel like this is Josh Allen's year. You know, the Bills-Broncos game started out as pretty tenuous back and forth. The Broncos have a really, really good defense. Sean Payton's a really, really good coach. But like all year long, Josh Allen, to me, has proven to be inevitable, and they figured it out. Dalton Kincaid had 3 catches. He had that big-time catch in the second half, and that game was not a fair fight, even though the start ultimately was back and forth, and if you're a Bills fan, you were probably a little bit nervous. But Josh Allen, it feels like, and I said this about Aaron Rodgers for a long, long time, and even though our guy is busy taking ayahuasca and talking to caterpillars as they turn into butterflies, there was a moment in time where I'm like, I've never seen anybody play the quarterback position like Aaron Rodgers plays the quarterback position, and he's too talented to not win a Super Bowl. And then he got his, and I still felt like, you know, and certainly the history of pro football, Scott Mitchell himself, who backed up Dan Marino, said Dan Marino is the best thrower of a football he's ever seen before. Dan never won one. But when, you know, you see Eli Manning get a couple, you see Peyton get a couple, Brady, of course, with a grip of them with 7 going to 10. I always felt like Aaron was too talented to really only win one, quite frankly, and he's not going to get another one. Like, obviously, that ship has sailed, but that's how I feel about Josh. And just like, you know, the greatest teams that I cheered for in New York with the Knicks and here in Salt Lake with the Jazz, those two teams in the 90s, the Knicks and the Jazz, had one thing in common about what stood in their way to get rings. Had nothing to do with their talent. It had nothing to do with their coaching. Had nothing to do with anything that they did. They simply had the misfortune of playing their best basketball at a time where this dude happened to play in Chicago and wear 23 on his back, and nobody could beat Mike come spring. You just couldn't do it when he was at his peak, and that's when the Knicks and the Jazz in the 90s had their best teams. And ultimately, Josh's kryptonite could be 15 for Kansas City. Simply put, Kansas City, though, feels a little bit more vulnerable than they have in years past. By the way, I still think they're going to win it. That's just the confidence I have in Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. But Josh Allen, to me, this year feels like it might be his time. And I'm also cheering a little bit for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, who had a good, not dominant win over a Steelers team that, I don't know, felt a little bit unserious after that great start. But I've been a little bit surprised at how many people who I respect and cover the game and know the game of football are really down on the Eagles despite a pretty dominant win in the wild card round against the Packers. But great weekend of pro football. Wraps up tonight with the Vikings and the Rams. You can hear that game on our radio station after we say goodnight tonight. We'll do more NFL coming up on the other side with Zach Moss. Over to Stevenson Sylvester. A lot of football for the first 2 hours of the show. Do a little hoops after that with Bobby Marks. The latest with RSL with Brian Dunseth. And we say goodnight at 6 on a Monday right here on ESPN 700. Wild card weekend in pro football ends tonight with a Monday night slate in Glendale, Arizona. State Farm Stadium, Vikings, Rams, Minnesota 2.5-point favorite. Let's talk some more football today, right now, with one of our favorites, one of the best to ever do it at the University of Utah, now with the Cincinnati Bengals. You guys know him. You love him. Zach Moss on a Monday afternoon. Zach, happy Monday, man. How we doing?
Happy Monday, man. I'm doing good. How you been?
I've been good. I appreciate the time as always. So, how much of the playoffs did you consume this weekend? I know, obviously, you guys unfortunately were eliminated after a great end of the season. Is it hard to watch, or are you just kind of a football guy and you want to tune in?
It's always hard to watch, obviously, from a competitive standpoint. I've missed personally the playoffs the last 3 seasons, I want to say now. So, competitively, you always want to be in that, and, it rises your gameplay and all that type of stuff. But definitely just been, enjoying the time off, long season, and just watching the games and watching guys that I know around the league, chase after that championship.
It's actually where I wanted to go next. Is there a rooting interest? Do you cheer for your fellow AFC North teams? Are you looking at former teammates, former Utes? Is there one team you want to see get this done?
I don't have one specific team. I think just, I just want to, see really good football. You don't want to see blowouts and, games where there's just a lot of turnovers and it favors one side or the other. I think, just one of those heavyweight, battles. Looking forward to the Buffalo-Baltimore game. I think it'll be one of those games that I'm, mentioning right now. So I just like to sit back, watch them, and, hope that we get a good game.
I probably buried the lead, man. Give us a health update. How you doing? What's the rehab process like, and what are some of your next steps?
Doing good, man. Feeling good. Blessed in that aspect. I'm just, home. Been home for a few months now. With the family and things like that. So, being able to, even in a bitter way, as in not being able to go out and perform on Sundays, but now being able to be home and perform in that way. So, it's always a positive somewhere. So I'm just enjoying the positives that I do have currently. But I'm feeling good. Rehab is going well, things like that. And, ready to get back out there.
Good to hear. You play for a team, Zach, that was a topic of conversation for a lot of people that cover pro football. And, of course, you were a conversation for us here on the show because we track your progress and cheer for you. And, I'm not one that's like Joe Burrow's number 1 or number 3 or number. I don't know where he is in the pantheon of quarterbacks in this league. But, Zach, he's as good. Sometimes I feel like he's as good as anyone, if not better. And you guys on offense are electric, dynamic, and we're among the best offenses in the entire AFC. So I feel like there is a foundation set in Cincinnati. If you just tweak a couple of things, you're going to be right there. What's kind of the mindset in that locker room?
Yeah, obviously I can speak, mainly only for offensive wise. We have just so many guys on the offensive side of the ball that can do a lot of different things, which is going to cause problems for teams just, at the end of the day. Luckily I've been able to play with 2 really, really good quarterbacks in their primes at the top of their game and things like that, and Burrow now, and the first few years I was in the league with Josh. So I've been able to see 2 guys, and how they go about the game and just the cerebral part of it and things like that. And, we got a really good team. Like you said, we got pieces, just like every other team, that we got to fill in to get a little better and things of that nature. And, we play in a very, very difficult division where it's, usually going to be probably a 3-team race to get into the playoffs out of one division. So, we'll be back, and, we know what we need to do now and what it looks like and what it needs to look like. So excited for that part of things, and it'll be a new challenge.
So you were the 3rd best offense in the AFC this year, but defensively, the team that gave up the same amount of points that you did was the Raiders, who won 4 games all year. And I'm not asking you to, nor would you ever throw a teammate under the bus, but does it get challenging when you feel like you're playing on the side of the ball that's carrying their weight and you're kind of looking around going like, dude, what gives? Like, we're doing everything we can here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it gets to some degree challenging. I mean, you kind of have to look at it in the lens of, when you're doing a school project, right? It's who's doing, part of the project, and then, the ones that aren't, but they want the credit and things of that nature. But like I said, we got a lot of guys that had to step up, young guys on just both sides of the ball, honestly. At the end of the day, we can't go out there and win the game without the defense, and vice versa. And you can interject special teams into that as well. It's got to have all 11 guys on both sides of the balls, clicking at the right time and doing the right things over and over. And that's how you are able to be successful in this league. And like I said, with our division being so tough, it's going to be usually a three-team race out of one division, and there's only so many spots. You can't have a lot of the things that happen to us where, sometimes it's player things, sometimes it's, the ball just didn't roll our way. We didn't get that bounce and things of that nature. So, at the end of the day, it's last year now. We can learn from those things and, move forward, and, hopefully we don't repeat those things.
So I'm kind of going to ask you a similar question about one of your teammates that I asked you about Burrow, but I'm going to be a little bit more demonstrative in my opinion, because I think a lot of people feel like Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in pro football, and for me, it's Jamar. Like every time it feels like he is an impossible cover. He can do anything from that position, and you've played in the league and in college with a lot of really talented skill position players, but what makes Jamar Chase who he is? What stands out most about the way he prepares, and what's it like to watch him do what he does week in and week out? Like I said, I think he's the best in the game right now.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, I've been lucky to, like you said, play with a lot of really, really good players across this league, and obviously played with Stephon Diggs and things of that nature, and got to see him, work and things like that. Jamar is just, very, very different in the sense of, one, his athletic ability separates him from so many guys just by that alone. It's really not fair on what he's able to do. He has the speed of a receiver, but he's, in a sense, built like a running back, and being able to be contacted and fight through contact and break tackles. He's really just a three-level receiver. You have some guys who can't catch slants and go everywhere, go all the way, right? You have some guys that can only do so many different levels. He can impact the game, and he's a threat from every single level, which makes it almost impossible for a defense to have to prepare and guard that when you can throw a guy a pass, 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, or you can throw a guy a 10-yard route, or you can throw him a deep ball, and it can all result in 6 at any point in time. So, to me, he's definitely the best. I think he went out there and proved that this season, posting the Triple Crown. And that was really cool, just being able to know you playing with someone on that level. People forget he missed all the training camp.
Yeah,
going out there doing that at the same time. So, once, contract is all situated and, you get into training camp and he gets really, really into shape and things of that nature, man, I think we haven't really seen all he can do, which is crazy to think, because he's only, I think, one of 5 players in NFL history to do a Triple Crown.
Yeah, it's wild and so fun to watch. I got to ask, one of your former teams looks like they've got a shot to win this thing, and obviously you spent the first part of your career with the Buffalo Bills. As a result of the time you spent there, is it more like you want to see them win it, or is it more like, man, that would be tough because that's my former team?
I think you definitely want to see them win it. I think, that's a really good team. We have really good teams when we were there. We just fell short, which sucks. But, over time, they've gotten better and things of that nature. And, definitely would love to see those guys win because, obviously I played with a lot of those guys that's still on that team and have a good relationship with those guys. And, they work really hard to be in this position. So, it'll be nice to see them win. I think I probably know a guy on each team that's in the playoffs currently right now. So, like I said, really just looking forward to really good ball. Those game-winning field goals and game-winning drives that kind of keeps you on the edge of your seats. It allows me to be a fan, and sometimes I always happen to be in those moments when you go through a 18-week season.
No, for sure. All right, let's do a little Utes. Zach, before I set you loose today, and let me start with your reaction to Coach Witt coming back, year 21. Nobody really knew what exactly was going to happen. And then after a really rough year, one of the worst years we've had here in a long time, as you know, Kyle took some time and decided that he's back on the sideline. What's your reaction that your former head coach is going to give it another go?
Yeah, I think that was the really, really good, smart move. Really, honestly, feel like that was the only move that made sense was him to come back. Couldn't see him leaving out, right, on a year like that, being in first year in a new division, a new conference and things like that. So I think the best thing was for him to come back and, put this team in a situation where they can win. One, let's, stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. A lot of injuries really derailed this team from being able to be competitive, like many people thought they would. So just the fact that guys can stay healthy, and now they kind of know the layout and what they're going up against all the way they can go out now and recruit and things of that nature to build this up. And I think mainly he really wants to leave this thing, well oiled up for Coach Scally when it's his turn to, take over the reins. So looking forward to that, looking forward to this season. Those guys are really good and the coaches are great. They've been for years. As long as guys can stay healthy, man, you really can't rule them out.
So I wanted to get your take, and we've got a lot of former college athletes on the show. We have a lot of former college football players, a lot of college basketball players, and I always kind of feel bad asking this question because if I was you, Zach, and knowing that you were a charismatic personality, you were really good with the media, and the public really loved you, and you were an awesome player, I would look at the fact that college running backs who are getting $500,000, $600,000 a year as something that kind of stings a little bit. Now, I know that you can't live in that space because obviously you move on. You're one of the guys that was good enough to cut a paycheck and several paychecks playing pro football. But now that you've been away from the college game and you've been more an observer of players being able to transfer all the time and actually get a little cash for their skill set, how would you articulate your opinion on where we're at with the current state of college football? Are you concerned about its future?
To some degree, I think you have to be concerned with, the future of, how competitive this thing can be. And obviously, college football being what it is and what it's always been, the money that pours into the universities all across, I think it's going to be very challenging and it's going to rule out a lot of different teams and a lot of different schools on, who can compete and, who has the biggest highest payroll and things of that nature. And that's what guys are really kind of going to go to. And a lot of these blue collar schools, schools that, honestly probably put out better, talent in the NFL that kind of lasts longer than some of these, bigger name schools that kind of is going to wash them out a little bit to some degree in what they're able to and how they're able to compete. And I think that part of it from the competitive standpoint is going to suck. I wish, that they would have had some type of understanding of what they wanted to do in the sense of the NCAA and how these payrolls are going to go out and how these things are going to look. And, right now it's kind of like just the Wild Wild West. Things are just happening and things are just doing and guys are just, jumping from school to school, left and right. And then obviously as an ex-college player, you want to see guys, get what they deserve from, reaping the benefits of their name and the work they do on the field week in and week out. But then also you want to see some type of loyalty from the standpoint of, it being just a more so of a level playing field when you throw in the financials. So I think, if they would have had a better understanding of what they want to do and how they were going to do it versus just kind of just opening up the floodgates, we kind of wouldn't be in this realm of, man, things are just kind of happening.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what you see more often than not, Zach, as you know, is the NCAA reacting instead of getting in front of it. And now we're in the scenario where, as you referenced, there's so much chaos. Now they're going to try to put some guardrails in. Coming up this summer is when the $20 million, I'll just call it a salary cap. Zach, I've started talking college football with the same terminology as the pros, because that's kind of where we're headed. So the school's going to have a salary cap. You know, you'll be able to pay players like their employees at some point. You'll still be able to have the name, image, and likeness benefits outside of the paycheck that you actually get. But I wonder, from your vantage point, how you feel like our market is set up to support the University of Utah football program, because the fact of the matter is, every college coach, when given the opportunity to address the public, they are pleading for donations. They're pleading for businesses to step up and help. And you played here, you lived here. How do you feel like we're equipped here in Salt Lake to keep up with the new normal of college football?
I mean, it's going to be challenging. Obviously, like I said, you know, one, it has to be a place where guys really want to come and they can see themselves, right, from just the living standpoint. And I think, you know, to some degree, BYU has done a really good job on how they are kind of doing it to some degree. And I think that's something that we can take a look at and, you know, pull from what we like out of what they're doing and what they're not doing, and kind of go from there. And, you know, you have a lot of these coaches that just aren't used to having to deal with, you know, 18, 19-year-old kids making all this type of money, because that does impact, you know, what practices look like, what, you know, film study looks like, and just the amount of time and, you know, trying to keep these kids out of harm's way at all times as well. You know, all of that stuff that people don't really think about does impact it. And a lot of these coaches are old school, and these are new times, and it's going to take a few years, right? Even doesn't matter if you have a ton of the backing and all that type of stuff. It's going to all be in home and how they are able to, you know, handle that and what type of players they recruit, because now more so than anything, maybe you have to think about the character of the guys you're bringing into your locker room and the people you're bringing into the community and things of that nature. And it's kind of hard to really grasp that when you're talking about 18, 19-year-old kids coming in and things of that nature. So I think it's going to be challenging. Again, that's why I said I think Coach Witt definitely, you know, wanted to make sure he leaves this thing on a really good note for Coach Scally, to where the transition, right, isn't super hard and they can compete for years to come. It's not like he has to start from scratch. And which really just puts you behind the eight ball when you're talking about being in a new conference with a lot of different schools that guys do really want to go to, and they have a lot of funding and things of that nature.
Do NFL players and coaches and people on your level, does it feel like college football, Zach, is moving towards the way of pro football? Is that kind of the redeeming thought among NFL players and coaches?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about guys in college. A lot of these guys make more than some pro athletes, man. And you know, that's something that also seeps into locker rooms when you're talking about drafting these guys and, you know, how long they stay in school. And it can hurt the NFL game to some degree, just because the hunger isn't there to, you know, most guys when they get drafted, if you're not in the first round, technically, even if you're in the first round, but usually if you're not in the first round, you have a different type of a hunger to get to a second contract, right? So now that's where you're talking about, you know, the financial freedom to some degree that you're setting up for years to come. But, you know, like I said, you got guys that maybe will be fifth or sixth round draft picks that would want a chance in the NFL, would want that dream to play out. They're making $5-6 million in college football, so there's almost no point, right, to even go and, you know, waste your time to some degree in the sport that's super, super physical, when you already kind of have, you know, what you made, you already kind of living that dream.
Yeah, no, well said. All right, Zach, last thing, then I'll set you loose. And I just want to continue to apologize to you, because I'm also going to ask you another question about what could have been if timing was different, because I have said before, and I'll say it again, the 2019 Utah Ute roster could potentially be the best roster, pure talent-wise, we've ever seen here. And I still believe that to be true. I've got the roster in front of me. I could go down it, but you know the deal. You were on that team. if you were able to stay healthy and the CFP was expanded to 12 in 2019, I don't know, man. I don't know that I really have a question. All I'm saying is I would have liked to see you guys have that shot, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, out of all the things we were able to accomplish and, push the team forward, that 2016 class, that's pretty much the 2019 team you're talking about. The way we were able to come in and push the team forward, I think the biggest thing that always sucks is, losing that game to Oregon. And then, thinking about maybe if we get in and, being in the 4-team race there. It would have been nice if we had a 12-team system. And you kind of just see what the chips may fall. If you're talking about a team, I think we had won maybe 8 or 9 games in a row at that time. And you're talking about a lot of steam and a lot of confidence and things of that nature. But like it sucks to, when you kind of think about it, but, it is what it is. And hopefully we can get one of these newer teams now that the youth are going to have, and these guys can, go out there and, put their name into that hat and have a chance to go out there and play for a national championship.
Well said, man. Hey, I appreciate the time. Okay, keep up that rehab. Get healthy. We want to see you back on the field next year, okay? Thanks, Zach.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. One of the best to ever do it at the University of Utah, Zach Moss, now with the Cincinnati Bengals. Porter, we've talked about that 2019 team before. And every time, we have Zach on or Britt or whoever, I pull up that roster, and it's stupid how much talent was on that team. And unfortunately, there were some injuries. I'll never forget that game at SC. They lost, 23-30 and then stumbled down the stretch. They played Texas in the Alamo Dome. Of course, they had the opportunity in the Pac-12 championship against Oregon. Some health issues, but simply from a talent standpoint, you can make the argument it's the best roster that Utah's ever had. I'm not kidding.
I do make that argument. Now, obviously, other teams finished stronger. They had better finishes to the year. Obviously, Stevenson's 2008 team will have an argument as Sly joins us next. But when it just comes to sheer talent, number one, the game has changed, right? The pool of players is better in 2019, as you're talking about, than it was in 2001, than it was in 1990. That's just a reality of the sport. But you look at that team, and yes, Tyler Huntley, Zach Moss, Jackson Barton, all these offensive players that are still playing in the NFL, but then you go to the defensive side of the football. How many of those players made it to the league, at least for a cup of coffee? I'll give you a guess. All of them. 11 players from the 2019 Utah defense. Not all of them starters, not all of them upperclassmen that year, but every single one of them at some point had a cup of coffee in the NFL, a practice squad. They got paid an NFL paycheck. That's something that I don't know has really ever happened anywhere else. I can guarantee you it's never happened at a Utah or another local school. And, yeah, they didn't finish the way that folks would have liked them to, but you got a glimpse, I think, in October, November of how good that team could have been. I think they won 5 or 6 straight. All of them were 40-plus points and holding their team to minimal. Sometimes you don't fulfill exactly your entire potential.
They won 8 straight games, and the only team to throw more than 13 was Washington up at Husky Stadium. That was a great game. Utah won that game 33-28. But, yeah, to Porter's point, won 8 games in a row. They started 11-1, and then a couple of losses down the stretch. But that was a talented group. Appreciate Zach's time. That's brought to you today by Advanced Window Products. New year, new window special, which is now $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more. It's a local Utah company. Talking Nate Orchard, Jake Weber, 2 really good dudes, great families, local families that are here to support you. They specialize in custom vinyl replacement windows and doors. So check them out. Sales and installation are all in-house. There's no middleman markup. They build it, they install it, and they guarantee it for life. The lifetime warranty is serviced by a local team. Transferable warranties to the next homeowner if you're selling your home. From the factory to your front door in 8 weeks or less, you can save on your energy bill with rebates available through InBridge Energy. Financing is available, so you can save now and pay later. Payments as low as $150 per month. So give them a call at 801-850-9100 or visit them online at advancedwindows.com. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. More football coming up next with Stevenson Sylvester. Going to do a little hoops with Bobby Marks today. And the latest on the chaos out south in Sandy at Real Salt Lake with Brian Dunseth before we say goodnight at 6 right here on ESPN 700. All right, 3 o'clock hour of the program gets rolling right now. Going to bring in Bobby Marks in a bit to do some NBA. Little RSL later on with Brian Dunseth. Special thank you to Zach Moss, who rolled through to start the program today. But let's continue the football conversation with one of our favorites, Stevenson Sylvester, back on the drive on a Monday. Sly, happy Monday, man. How we doing? Hello, Sly.
Oops, sorry, I was on mute there. Happy Monday, brother. How you doing?
Thanks for joining us. You know, I've done that so many times. Are you on Zoom or Google Live? Like, how are you joining us today?
Google Meet, man.
Google Meet, yeah.
Porter got me introduced to that, man, and I much prefer doing my interviews that way. I have zero connection issues, and it just feels better.
Love it, and you sound great. And I've done the mute thing several times. And Sly, I'm going to apologize right out of the gates before I ask a question, because I don't mean disrespect. Porter and I were debating this last segment as our guy Zach Moss hopped on the show, or the team. He's part of our team, so are you. And here's what I'll say, Sly. I just want your reaction. You guys will always go down. The 2008 team that won that Sugar Bowl, I believe the Sugar Bowl win over Alabama is the best win in the history of Utah football, all due respect to conference championships and such. And you guys will go down as one of, if not the greatest Utah football team of all time. If I said to you that 2019 is the most talented team on paper that Utah football potentially has ever had, what would you say to me?
I can't argue that. That's all subjective, right? And honestly, I'm good with that, right? On paper is not as good as results. And so we've seen that, right? Like, we came into last season like, this is the best team Utah's ever had on paper. Look what happened, right? So as far as a comparative, like, I don't mind that. 2008 team, doing my research with, my Utah Man brand and talking to all the old players from the past, it's about a whole bunch of undervalued guys overperforming, right? Guys proving people wrong, day in and day out, from training camp throughout the season. And even when everything is pointed to you supposed to be winning, everybody would still denounce you or think less of you, and you still proved them wrong. And that was the mentality of those guys. So honestly, I'm more excited and privileged and honored to be a part of that style of team, because that's what sports is all about, than somebody who's better on paper.
For sure. Well said. No argument here. But I'm going to follow up with a question, and if you can solve it, you might get a phone call to go coach the Cowboys, because it's what everybody wants to know, Sly. Because what are the elements, like 2019, I'm not trying to pick on them, but any team that's great on paper, and then there's a team like you guys who won every game in front of you, which is all that matters. What are the most important dynamics to make sure that a team that on paper has every single thing that you could want? Talent, experience, offense, defense, special teams, and the road between day one of spring ball and the final day of the season that for you culminated in a Sugar Bowl win over Alabama. How do you turn talent into results? What are some of the key dynamics?
It's leaders. End of the day, it's the type of leaders that you have. And I can humbly say that from the different teams and the things that I've seen, it's the leaders on the team and how they lead, right? People can consider themselves a leader, but like, are you willing to do what you're asking somebody to do, right? Like, a lot of people hate their bosses, right? Because like, they're asking me something so simple, like, why don't they just do it, right? And so it's more of like, can you lead by example? Would your teammate or the person next to you believe that what you're asking of them, that you're willing to do, right? And it's, so for me, it's the leaders on the team. When I got on to Pittsburgh, my first year, we went to the Super Bowl, right? And the leaders on that team was just second to none, right? Pittsburgh started going downhill when those guys left Pittsburgh, right? Like the Heinz Wards, the Ben Roethlisbergers, the Willie Colognes, the Max Starks, the Troy Polamalu's, Ryan Clark's, and Ike Taylor's, to Brett Kiesel, to Casey Hampton, to James Ferrier, James Harrison. Like, those leaders right there, they set the stage for how everything is supposed to go. Those leaders, the coaches didn't need to talk to. They knew what to get done. Whether you had the talent or not, you still have to go out there and earn it and execute it. And there's no prime example today more than the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions look great on paper, and they're going out there and executing every single week and earning their recognition, man. So I just think that it's all about the leaders on the team. It was for us in '08 of going out there and putting in the work.
Yeah, and that's probably a tried and true principle, both in sports and in life, right? Great leaders that understand what to do, and then it probably takes a lot of humble followers, correct? Yes. I mean, it doesn't matter what your talent level is. Like, if you've never done something before, it's probably an important element of a team to have people that are willing to listen to the older classmen and understand what it is to be part of Utah football culture. Is that kind of in line with what you're thinking?
That's 100%. And that's kind of where I want to get back to. Like, I always look at like what happened this past year. Cause I'm like, we had the talent. We talked about, or I came into the season talking about the depth it would benefit us for when we do have injuries, people can step in and we shouldn't miss a beat. And as soon as Cam Rising got hurt, we went to straight crap. So at that point, where were our leaders and what were our leaders doing? To inevitably make the whole team step up and make things happen, right? And so it's leaders for me. I looked at it, over and over again, and just like and how they do it, right? You got leaders of all kinds of different stuff. People consider themselves leaders, but I think there's a certain type of leader that it is. Coach Whittingham says it all the time. He's an alpha dog, alpha of alpha, right? But like, what type of leader are you, and can you be the right leader that will bring a locker room together? And I just don't feel like we had that last year.
So this is interesting. I didn't plan on doing this today, but it's one of the things I like about interviewing you. We can go in a bunch of different directions, and now I'm thinking about what the BYU players said after the Alamo Bowl post-game press conference. Connor Pay, a lot of the seniors and upperclassmen were there. And every single one of them talked about the leadership in the locker room from the players. And they weren't diminishing the leadership of the coaches. But what is the difference, Sly? What's the difference between having great leadership in your coaching staff and then having great leadership on the team with players? Because I do think it does hit different a little bit when you hear it from your peer.
It's for me, I interviewed Connor after the Alamo Bowl too, and these are a lot of questions that I ask him because I have my own opinion, but I want to see the validity of it, right? I want to make sure that my theory or whatever I thought when I was a player or what I think today, holds true, and it's the same. So yeah, but for me, with all of that, it's ownership, right? You gotta be willing to own what you're a part of. So it doesn't matter how much money you make, how long you've been there. What type of ownership do you have on the product that you're a part of, right? And so the coaches can't make you understand ownership. You have to understand it. It has to go to people that are on your level, that are putting in the work that you're into, and it's ownership, right? And like, do you feel and if you have ownership of your product, you want the best out of your product, right? And so for me, if I put anything out there, anything that has my name attached to it, right? Everybody wants to talk about NIL, right? Anything that has my name attached to it, I want to make sure it represents me in the best light, right? If my name is attached to the University of Utah, that's why I'm so prideful and why I love the university so much. If my name is attached to that, I want it to be held in the highest standard. Right. And that's what we had in 2008. That's what I had on my team in Pittsburgh. And that's what I think a lot of championship teams have, is they have ownership between each and every player. Right. Everybody plays like talk about, I have to own my, 12 square feet. Right. The square feet around me, I have to own that. And I have to know that the person next to me believes that I'm going to do that to the best of my abilities. And not only to the best of my abilities, that I can do it. He believes that I can do it. So for me and the leaders, and what I took from Connor Pay was ownership of this team, ownership of the product that we're putting out there each and every week, and that people are watching and just loving what you do.
Follow up. Does a quarterback have to be a leader? I mean, you obviously play with Brian, who you had a quarterback who was a leader. And Coach Witt talked a lot about Cameron Rising, how he was, and I hate to say was, it just doesn't sound like he's coming back. And I could keep going down the list, but you referenced the Lions, and look, Jared Goff's a really good player. We saw him, we were in the Pac-12 footprint. We saw him play Utah. I don't know if he strikes me as like one of their main leaders. Maybe he is. I'm not in the locker room, but do you have to have a quarterback who's also one of your preeminent leaders?
Well, I think it makes the most sense, but I don't think that at the end of the day, that makes the team. I think it's the easier way when you have that guy who has the ball in his hands. It's like the point guard, right? You want your point guard to be your leader, right? Like, what were the teams of Michael Jordan's teams without like a Ron Harper or Steve Price or Steve Kerr, right? Or Gary Payton. He was the leader of his team, right? The Chauncey Billups, right? Like, they were the leaders of the team that you look up to. So you want to have that person, because they have the ball in their hands most often, to be the leader. That just makes everything and everybody, because they want the ball, they want to be effective, they'll look at that person more often because that person's name will more often be said. Like, if you listen to a play-by-play guy, they're going to say a person's name more often, right? Like, if you're just listening on the radio and somebody says Chauncey Billups has the ball, passes it to Rip Hamilton, passes it back to Chauncey Billups, passes it to Rasheed Wallace, hits the couldn't Tayshaun Prince. Oh, that's a goal. Whose name did they say more often in that than anything? It's the point guard. Same thing with the quarterback. Quarterback takes the snap from center. They're going to say the name of this guy who's delivering the ball to handing the ball off and orchestrating the play more often than not. So I think it's easier when it's the quarterback for it to be your team, to like, you can't have a team without your quarterback being the leader. I don't agree with that. Because I've been a part of teams where quarterbacks are not the vocal leader, but they go out there and execute. They lead by example. So they're a type of leader. To be the head honcho leader, that's the rah guy, I don't think it's completely necessary. But again, you just got to make sure that person is bought in and has ownership of his 12 square space, and makes it happen. But at the end of the day, the quarterback being the leader doesn't have to be it for you to have a team, but I do think it's the easiest to get your entire team to buy in, because everybody knows football is the most people, right? You have to have the most people on the same page than any other sport that's out there. And if your quarterback is at the helm of it, it just makes it easier to do that.
One more question about this before we get accused of hosting a TED Talk, Sly, on Monday instead of talking football. I'm just curious because, college or pro, who's the best leader you ever played with in your career?
Oh my gosh. The best leader as a player. There's been a few, right? Like, for me, I love James Ferrier. James Ferrier, when I got to the NFL, he was just a guy that everybody looked up to. And as far as if we go the way James Ferrier goes. That's Troy Polamalu, that's Ryan Clark, that's Ike Taylor, that's Brett Kiesel. They looked at James Ferrier, even offensively, Willie Colon, Marquise Pouncey, Mendenhall, even Roethlisberger. They looked at James Ferrier. He was one of the best examples of the head honcho. And it became so natural to him, because he was so cool. Like, you wouldn't even, I don't know, just as a guy that you looked up to, respected, knows going to put in the work, and everybody believed in. I thought James Ferrier was one of the best leaders I was ever around.
Interesting stuff. All right, let's move off of it and actually talk some football now. And let's do a little college. We'll end with pro, and I'll set you loose on a Monday. Do you like this new format now that we've seen it unfold? Because it's one thing to say, hey, I like the idea of 12 teams, or the premise is sound, but you have to see what it's like. You have to witness how it unfolds before you can actually have a fully baked opinion. So now that we have a final, Ohio State, Notre Dame, what do you make of our first experience as college football fans witnessing this 12-team CFP?
Man, I loved it. It automatically got me thinking of the future. What are the next few years going to be like now that the players know what it's going to be like and the possibilities of it, right? Now that each team understands, like, okay, Boise State got in it and SMU got in it. we could be one of the Indiana got it. We could be one of those teams, and we have a possibility. I'm Indiana. If I beat Notre Dame, I can go play Georgia, and I could beat Georgia, right? I scored more points on Notre Dame than Georgia scored on Notre Dame, right? I can do that, and then I can beat the next team, and I like it. It's just more possible when you've seen it done, and the possibilities of you making it happen, right? Like even our 2008 team, about us breaking into the BCS and beating teams like that, we've seen it done, right? We've seen the 04 team, break the BCS, or even before that in 2003 when they were just beating teams like Texas A&M and North Carolina, and then just everybody they lined up against, they demolished them, right? And even the year before in 2007 when UCLA was ranked number 11 in the country and they came into Rice-Eccles Stadium and we just beat the brakes off of them. So we knew it was possible by the examples of the years before us, right? And now that this has been done, I just think that other schools are looking at that like we always had an epiphany, like, oh, maybe we could do it. But you've seen Arizona State take Texas to the brink. Arizona State possibly should have won in many examples, right? You take that field goal that bounced on the ground, but bounced through the uprights. Technically, they won, right? Imagine them playing against Ohio State, right? And not losing it in the last 2 minutes of the game, right? And not throwing a freaking pitch on goal to go situation. Oh, so stupid. But like, I think the possibility that other schools are now looking at in this 12-team format is just great. And I just think that the years to come are just going to be that much more interesting, that much more intriguing. I think it brings that much more fire to regular season games to get to the opportunity to be a part of the playoffs.
So I asked you prior to the semifinal, kind of what your gut told you about these games. And
I don't need to remember.
I know you did a good job of breaking down why ultimately every game is kind of its own thing. And it's all about matchups. And as a guy that played for Utah, that beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl in 2008, when not a lot of people thought you would, you're well equipped to talk about how any team can beat any other team on any given day. But it feels like nobody believes that Marcus Freeman, by the way, what an impressive dude. How about your first coaching job in life is just Notre Dame, at the age of 35, and now at the age of 39, he has a chance to win a national championship.
Against his team, his alma mater.
Exactly.
I didn't know it was his alma mater. That's even more insane.
Awesome storylines, but Vegas isn't giving Notre Dame much of a chance. The general public, according to the money, giving them almost zero chance at all. Ohio State's an 8-point favorite. Do you think the Irish have a fighting chance? No pun intended.
Anytime you lace them up, you have a fighting chance. And so I'm always for a game not being won before it's played, right? And I think that these odds and lines from Vegas are just more motivation and bulletin board material than anything. And so it's all about how you line up, right? I didn't think Notre Dame would do what they did against Georgia, but let alone Georgia have as bad of receivers as they did. Like, I didn't think they could drop the ball that many times. I thought, the matchup against Penn State was very equal. And as it was 24-24 to the last second. Right. And so, I think this matchup going into Ohio State, I do think Ohio State has the edge, but you've seen in this Texas game, it's never over. Like, Ohio State started on fire and then they got one penalty and they went right back in the tank, and Texas kind of came back in the game. But it was 14-21, and Texas has 1 yard to gain to make it 21-21, and they don't make it happen. Like, that game was close until the end. You can look at 28-14 and like, oh, they had it handily. No, Ohio State did not have that handily. And that's what I was talking about, the other week, is that, like, Texas can make it happen, right? And so I think that's going to be the same situation in this national championship game. It's going to be exciting. I think it's going to be a great matchup. And if you can put a game plan together, anything is possible, right? It's not like the NBA Finals where you have to score 4 games. You have to win 4 games against a single opponent to actually win it. This is sudden death, man. You got one opportunity to make this happen. I love this. And I think it's going to be a great matchup. I do give the edge to Ohio State. When you look at the offense, the defense, I give it to them. I don't think it's going to be an 8-point game. I think it'll be a little closer. But these national championship games are are always interesting. And here's one thing that if Notre Dame pulls this out, is because I believe they have more heart than anybody in this bracket. The way that they play, they want it more. And that's all about the leader in Marcus Freeman to instill that in him, right? Like the coach for the Lions, he's instilling the ability to want it more in his players than the opponent. That Vikings game at the end of the season was awesome, and I think that's exactly what Marcus Freeman is doing in his Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and so I just think it's going to be a great game because of that.
All right, we'll do a little NFL slide, and I'll set you loose. And one of the coolest things, in my opinion, about your football career is you played college football for Kyle Whittingham and pro football for Mike Tomlin. Like, that's a really, really cool thing, man, that puts you in a very small group. You know the deal, though. I mean, it's been 8 years since the Steelers' playoff win. It's the longest playoff drought since 72. Mike's streak of 18 consecutive non-losing seasons is insane. But you know the standard in Pittsburgh, and look, I'm a fan. I don't think they should do anything. I don't think they will, but there's a lot of noise around your former head coach. I just want to get your thoughts on it.
I don't think it's coming from Steeler fans. I think it's coming more from outside opinionists. Mm-hmm. But like, who else are you gonna get? Mm-hmm. Right? Who's gonna replace Mike Tomlin? Steelers have had 3 coaches in the last 45 years. Who? Here's my thing. Everybody who always has an opinion of something, is there someone else you have in mind that would do a better job? Because it's not, right? The Steeler mentality and how they do it, from the roster that they assemble, from the ownership that they have, you have to have a certain personality fit that and do that, right? And I think the Steelers have slipped up and just been able, but this is football, man. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's not like the NBA playoffs where you get 4 opportunities against a single opponent. It's sudden death. And if you don't make it happen, it's good. But you look at the talent in the West the last 15, 20 years. Look at the last 25 years, right? It was the Patriots, Tom Brady, right? You got all kinds of teams in the AFC have been making noise, from Carson Palmer and in the same division. We've been Ray Lewis and the Baltimore Ravens have been in the same division for the last 25 years. Like, it is not easy to win in the AFC, right? And I want to do more research to see how many Super Bowls the AFC in the last 25 years have won over the NFC. But like, it's not easy to win in the AFC. It's a sudden death deal. I'm telling you, you'd be a lot more hurt if you were a Steelers fan and having a losing record every year than going to the playoffs and losing, right? Like, what if you were the Browns? What if you were the Jets? What if you were, some of these other lowly teams that may have one good year in the last 10 to 15 years? There's literally a possibility every single year with the Steelers. And so you got to keep that. I think, Mike Tomlin is trying to figure it out and navigate this new day and age with what type of personnel that we need to have, right? Like, you look at that game against Baltimore and you just seen a lot of lackluster effort. How do you motivate guys that you're paying all this money, right? Like, you got to do that in and out. How do you motivate guys, that they got to want it themselves, right? And for me, I'm watching that game and I'm just like, how the hell did the Pittsburgh Steelers defense look like they've never seen or heard or played against Lamar Jackson before? That first drive was abysmal. And I'm just like, where's your technique? What were you practicing all week? It was terrible. And I'm just like, it was going to be an uphill battle because, one, Baltimore's surging at the end of the season, which is what you want to do. They got a talented roster, but that going in, that. They're beatable, that's for sure. But, it's just, I don't know. I just felt like, there was a certain point in the game where the players felt like, oh, man, we can't win this. And they just stopped fighting. And so it just sucked. But I've been down 21 points to an opponent, and we've came back and won. And that's what the Steelers were. And they just didn't have that mentality of that we could overcome. And that was just unfortunate.
Well, and we could reduce it pretty simply where, Mike and the Steelers had such a great run when they had a much better option on a quarterback. And I think Russ did a pretty admirable job after he was left for dead in Denver. But do they run it back with Russell Wilson next year? What do you think?
No. No, I don't think so. I think, you played great with Russell Wilson. Hopefully that Justin Fields was able to learn a lot of things with Russell, and then he can attack this offseason like that. But I was thinking about it too right after the meeting. I would have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields sit down if I'm Mike Tomlin. I know this office too because I've sat in there multiple times. But like I'd sit them both in my office and being like, "Yo, Russ, we did sign you to a 1-year deal, but but Justin is our starter. If you want to go test the market, that's great. If you don't find anything that you like, because you're getting paid $30-40 million a year from Denver not to play for them anyway, if you want to come back, we would love to have you as a backup. But this will be Justin Fields' offense going forward." And that's exactly how I would tell him. I think Russell Wilson would be professional and understand that. I think he probably understands that already. And that's how I would go about it. But you give the keys to Justin Fields. He's the younger guy. He's got a lot of potential. He led this team great. There was things that he can learn. He's been able to sit. And this is what a lot of these college kids don't freaking understand is like, it's okay to sit a year. It's okay to sit down and learn. Everybody's like, "Oh, I can play faster here." That doesn't mean good things for your future, right? You're wasting years, potential opportunity there. And so, like, I think Justin Fields was able to sit and be humble, but I think that Pittsburgh needs to vocalize that this is Justin Fields' team and instill all the confidence that you can in him.
All right, Sly, before I set you loose, my two-parter, and it could be the same. They're not mutually exclusive, but who do you think will win the Super Bowl, and who do you want to win the Super Bowl?
Oh man, it's going to be crazy. We haven't seen the guys that had the first round bye in the playoffs yet. Houston looked absolutely amazing, so I can't wait to see that Kansas City Houston matchup. The Baltimore Buffalo matchup is going to be an instant classic. My team's been the Commanders all year because my boy BJ's over there killing it. And watching Jaden Daniels just overcome so much, I just can't wait to see what he does against Detroit. Detroit has so many injuries on defense that they may be susceptible to getting beat by the Commanders. You have no idea. But I just think that, one, there's just so many teams that have the opportunity to make this happen. You'd want to get Josh Allen to finally overcome the hump, right? Get over Baltimore, get over Kansas City, get to that Super Bowl and show your stuff. I'm hoping I can see a Buffalo, Philadelphia Super Bowl. It's kind of what I think. And then I think Philadelphia is too deep. And so the Eagles might win the Super Bowl this year.
All right, Sly, appreciate the time, man. Always good stuff. Happy Monday. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
Stevenson Sylvester, one of the best to ever do it at the University of Utah, with some fiery takes today. 2019 Utah roster, man. I think it's the most talented team the Coach Witt's ever had. Sly played in 2008. They beat Bam in the Sugar Bowl. They won all of their games, so there's a bit of a mic drop there. Yeah, the Tomlin thing is interesting. I mean, you're not going to talk to anybody that covers football that doesn't think he's a great coach. It was Alex Smith himself. I was listening to Alex talk about how archaic the offense is, and it might be time to upgrade. I don't know, man, but the results just haven't been there in the playoffs. It has been 8 years since the Steelers won a playoff game. It's their longest playoff drought since 1972. They have the same amount of playoff victories as the Jets over the past 8 years, which is 0. But Tomlin has 18 straight non-losing seasons, which is wild. So we'll see. I don't think they're going to move on from him during their first 10 seasons. The Steelers ranked tied for 5th with 8 postseason victories, and they won Super Bowls under Mike, and, his results are what they are. So we'll see if they decide to make a little bit of a change, but appreciate Sly's time. We'll do a little more football later on. Don't forget, you can hear Monday Night Football on our station tonight after we say goodnight. We're going to do the Craig Smith Coaches Show first, and then we'll join the Rams and the Vikings game in progress. That game is being played in Glendale. It was moved from Los Angeles as a result of the horrible fires. So appreciate Sly's time. Going to do a little basketball coming up with Bobby Marks, ESPN front office NBA insider. The latest on a bizarre kind of under the radar. We're pretty football centric right now, and obviously we'd be more basketball centric if the Jazz were more interesting, but it's football, basketball for the most part. But the last few weeks, if you have not been paying attention, and I don't blame you, but our local soccer club finds itself in a precarious spot. A lot of head-scratching moves without a lot of reinforcements on the way for now. and they play a game in, I don't know, a few weeks. It's next month, the CONCACAF tournament. I know you guys are dialed into that. So we'll bring in Brian Dunseth coming up for the latest on RSL. But Stevenson Sylvester brought to you today by our friends at Overtime Cards and Collectibles. It's 10673 South State Street in Sandy. So here's the deal. If you're a man of a certain age, namely my age, namely your mid-40s, there's a good chance that once upon a time, and you're also listening to Sports Talk Radio, so you probably collected cards once, right? Basketball cards, football cards, baseball cards. And there's a chance that you have not looked at those cards in maybe decades. That was my situation. Maybe they're sitting in your mother's basement or your grandfather's warehouse or storehouse or garage somewhere. So when my buddy Chris opened up Overtime Cards and Collectibles, it just dawned on me, like, take all your cards in, see if there's anything of value there. It's a hobby that's kind of come back a little bit. It was massively, popular when I was like 10 to 15 back in the 90s, 80s. Doesn't matter. It was massively popular when I was a kid, and it's kind of made a comeback. So like me, if you have a grip of cards or memorabilia and you want to see if you have any value, Overtime Cards and Collectibles can help you out. So it's 10673 South State Street in Sandy. I brought boxes of cards in there, and Chris called me and said, you have a Kobe Bryant rookie card that's worth like a grip of money. I had no idea. It's sitting on my mantle now. I hope to give it to my son for a down payment on a house or something. So check them out. Buy all your favorites there. Rare sports cards, local legends. Hard to find Pokemon cards. Not a thing when I was a kid, but maybe you're into it now. So start a new fun hobby of collecting, and there's no better spot to do it than Overtime. Check them out online at overtimecardsandcollectibles.com, where you can buy and trade. All right, more coming up next on a Monday Drive on ESPN 700. All right, time for your chance to catch some tickets to the red-hot Utah Utes men's basketball team. That's right. First Big 12 win Saturday night, OK State. On fire. Text Utes right now to 33986 to enter for Utah men's basketball tickets. Very happy for Craig and very happy for that team. There was no way they were going to go through conference play without winning a game. But we talked to Sean Mooney about this last week, and we were kind of debating and discussing when that first Big 12 win would come Utah's way. And it came in dominant fashion against OK State on Saturday at the Huntsman Center. And Utah now hits the road to take on TCU, a TCU team that beat Brigham Young over the weekend. You know, pretty surprised about the start of the season to BYU. And I've got to say, I know the Yegor Deming kid is thought to be a top 10 lottery prospect, and he's only a freshman. I'm not trying to crack on him. But I watched more or less than the entire TCU game. I saw a lot of the Texas Tech game. The Houston game, look, Houston, whenever I watch Kelvin Sampson's team, I'm like, those are pros. Those are like grown men playing against college kids. And the Texas Tech game for BYU was more about make or miss. But TCU was not thought to be a very good team. Like everyone else in the Big 12, they have a lot of talent. But the Deming kid just does not appear to have a great feel for this level of basketball. He had 4 turnovers and a couple of bad ones down the stretch, and BYU was down 2. And Yegor took like a step-back fadeaway 3 with plenty of time left, and it wasn't close. So I bring it up because he's thought to be like a top 10 NBA prospect. I'm just not seeing it as of now. Richie Saunders has played really well for him. Cannon Catchings is the other NBA prospect on that roster. There's some other players, like Dallin Hall really should be their primary ball handler in those situations because he has experience there. In my opinion, instead of the Yegor Deming kid, I think Dallin just has more of a calming presence. But for all of the talent that BYU has, on that roster, and Kevin has at his disposal, as I've discussed ever since the announcement came down that A.J. DeBanso is headed to Provo to play college basketball for 5 months, all these things are great. Like, it's awesome. BYU Athletics has momentum right now, probably in a way that Utah Athletics doesn't yet. These things are cyclical, and they can change at the drop of a hat, but that's kind of where we're at for now. But now Kevin's got to show he can coach, man. Like, the pressure really is on the head coach when the talent is clearly on the team. Like, Kevin's got to he's never been a head coach. And, well, excuse me, I think he was a G League head coach. But, of course he coached in the NBA. And all of that is fine and good. And because of Kevin's NBA ties, he has the ability, and we've already seen it, to recruit players at a high level by dropping names like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Chris Paul. And the BYU coaching staff is littered with NBA experience, G League experience, as is the entire, quite frankly, operation. Yeah, he did coach in the G League. He was the head coach, Phoenix Suns assistant. So Kevin's had head coaching experience before, but when the talent is clearly on the roster, the onus is entirely on the coaching staff. And that's just the deal with basketball on any level, okay? Because I don't think anybody would argue that Utah's talent is superior to that of Brigham Young's. And so it's fine and good to be able to recruit future pros. And it sells tickets and it provides excitement, but you got to prove you can coach. Anyway, text Utes to 33986 to enter for Utah men's basketball tickets. So I was really excited and happy for Craig and his roster to get that first Big 12 win, because it has just been a bit of a slog, and it's been tough, and Craig is trying with different rotations. I think that was his 6th different starting lineup of the season. They're just trying to figure it out right now. And, it ultimately does come down to the conversation is, what are these crowds going to look like? So BYU's coming up here in Salt Lake City on January the 18th. So right around the corner, we're going to see BYU Utah here in Salt Lake. I do wonder what that crowd will look like, and see over the next couple of games if the Utes can pile up some wins here or there. Maybe folks will be a little bit more motivated to come see Utah basketball. But text in right now for your chance to win some tickets. Also, text ASSET. We're asking you to do a little texting. I would imagine message rates apply, so don't get mad if you get your cell phone bill. But text ASSET right now to 508-777-1000. That's 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us over here at ESPN. Porter, I kind of feel bad. I feel like I pitted Zach Moss and Stevenson Sylvester against each other. That was not my intent. I thought Sly's points were well taken. Now, in the modern day and age of political discourse, quite frankly, sport discourse, where you're supposed to crack a mic and yell an opinion that you don't even believe just to be salacious and incendiary, I know it's not popular in this line of work to acknowledge that two things could be true, but could we acknowledge that 2019 had more talent on paper, yet 2008, that's the team that got it done?
I think that's exactly where you should land because it's the truth. Yes, that 2008 team had plenty of NFL talent, and they similarly put a bunch of guys on the defensive side of the football into the NFL. But you just look at around the league right now, Spence. Around the NFL today, Julian Blackmon, Jalen Johnson, Devin Lloyd, Lecky Fotu, Bradley Anai, Tyler Huntley, Zach Moss.
Britton Covey was on that team.
Cody Barton.
You know who else was on that team? Brant Keithy.
Britton Covey, Brandon Keithy, Mika Tafua. These are all guys that have played in the NFL. So outside of Brant Keithy so far. That is the most talented team on paper that has ever walked through the University of Utah. I am not only, and that's not only my take, I am confident saying it, but again, that doesn't tell the whole story because injuries played a part, yes, but they kind of fell apart at the end. And obviously the Pac-12 championship didn't happen. The playoffs in which the 4-team playoff, it wasn't a 12-team playoff, the 4-team playoff, Spence, that they only needed to beat Oregon to get into. Let's be clear, everything else fell into place. If Utah would have won the Pac-12 championship in 2019, they would have gone in to bowl season, the number 4 team in the country, and they would have had a chance at a college football playoff. So I think it is worth mentioning, and I think you're exactly right. I think that's where we should land because it's just the realistic take.
I liked Sly's fire, though. When I asked him, what's your response if I say 2019 is the most talented team we've ever had here? He went full Sly on that one. And if I was on 2008, I would feel the same way. Because honestly speaking, I feel like most people, and I'm raising my hand, okay, rank 2004 over 2008. 2004, and we could get into the weeds on this debate as well, because I think 2019 is also more talented on paper than 2004. The Utah football 2004 is the best football team I believe we've ever had in this state, with the way they just kind of came together and smoked everyone.
Yeah, I think 3 things can be true at the same time.
What?
Spence.
Hey, you behave yourself. We're going to break people's minds. People these days are not capable of holding 3 thoughts in their head.
The 2004 Utes team is the greatest team to go through this program. The 2008 team is the best football team to go through this program. And the 2019 team is and should have been the most talented team that has gone through that program. And I think we can land the plane somewhere around there.
5 things can be – wait. Let's move up to 4 things can be true.
100 things.
Calm down. It's Monday, okay? We got to pace ourselves. We got 5 of these this week.
Sorry.
What's the most – could it be possible the 2023/24 Utah football is the most disappointing team? Making 4 things true on a Monday afternoon. I know we're getting weird. Can we say that 4 things are now true?
I think so. And that has more to do with the expectations and the result to me. And the expectations were warranted. Let's be clear. They should have had very high expectations. And you add in the fact that we're talking about 2025 being the year the 12-team college football playoff is debuted. You add in the fact that they're rejoining BYU in the Big 12 and all of the collision course that was the Pac-12, Big 12 independent drama kind of colliding in 2025 and the Utes laying an egg. Man, that's more disappointing than any season in program history, and I don't think it's really close.
5 things can be true. 2021, Utah football, Pac-12 champ, the most surprising team
Okay.
in Utah football history. So we have the best season, the best team, the most disappointing. Now 5 things can be true. The most surprising team in Utah football history.
I disagree.
Damn it.
Because I think that was building. I think if you watch this team in 2015, 2016, you watch Zach and Tyler, that thing was turning. And it was, you just needed to get a quarterback. You just needed to replace Tyler Huntley and keep that thing turning. I'm going to go back to old Scott Mitchell, old, middle of the McBride era where you just start throwing, 70 passes in a game with the big lefty back there and actually winning a game or two. I'm going to go with that just because I actually expected that 2021 team to be really good.
Well, we got to 4 things can be true at once, and most media shows of any kind, sports, politics, whatever, cannot get to 4 things. So I feel like we've done a good job.
I think we've accomplished something.
Started a little physical therapy today once again. Found myself back.
There we go.
No, it's not
the shoulder.
Awesome. It's the shoulder this time. It was the knee last year. It was the rib the year before that. And it's just like I walk in. Now my physical therapist is one of my best friends.
I was going to say, it might just be the routine now. Like you used to do a radio show and then go home and walk the dog and then work out and then, cook dinner. You may just put PT on the list now.
Yeah, we're like homies. I walk in and the receptionist, she's like, Spence, hey, great to see you. I'm like, I don't want to be the guy that everyone in the physical therapy office knows. I don't want to be that guy, but I've turned into that guy.
Yep.
4 weeks to get the wing right. Okay, we're doing a little exercise. It was pretty encouraging, but I'm not allowed to swing a golf club until I'm good.
That's probably good advice.
Yeah.
As much yoga as you can, and you maybe avoid the PT a little bit more.
Porter, I can't do yoga because chaturanga, man. Get familiar with the poses.
I'm behind.
You want me to start doing rapid chaturangas and down dogs when my shoulder's bad? Neophyte. A little better knowledge here, please, of the practice, the art.
I just want your range of mobility to be better so you don't get injured.
I'm glad you're being part of the solution. I appreciate that. Anyway, hang in there, stretch, don't get hurt, and try not to age. I don't know what the secret is, but we're doing the best we can. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. We'll get back to football in the 5 o'clock hour. Don't forget, we are going to say goodnight at 6. Time for the Craig Smith Coaches Show at Slackwater. Craig and Riles will have that for you. Utah basketball with their first Big 12 win of the season, so congrats to them. And after the Craig Smith Coaches Show, stay tuned because you're going to hear the conclusion and probably the majority, quite frankly, of the Vikings and the Rams game. That Monday Night Tilt will wrap up the wild card weekend of pro football. But coming up next, Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider, do some NBA and some jazz. Brian Dunseth will stop by to provide hopefully some brevity, hopefully some knowledge and understanding of where we're at with an RSL roster that appears to be lacking right now. A lot of holes in the attack. Hopefully Dunny can make sense. 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Great to have you with us on a Monday afternoon. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Monday Night Football on your airwaves this evening. Don't forget, we are your home of the NFL and college football in this market. We'll come your way after the Craig Smith Coaches Show. Utah Men's Hoops gets their first Big 12 win of the year over the weekend, so stay tuned for that. But joining me now, man, it's been a while, but I always appreciate when the great Bobby Marks can make some time, and he does on a Monday afternoon. Bobby, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for the time. Of course, I will not bury the lead. Your reaction on LiAngelo Ball signing a deal with Def Jam worth $13 million.
I thought that's what you were going to lead the show into, his new song. Probably not. You know, it's funny. We were talking. I have a 15 and I have an 18-year-old. We were talking about it, and I was like, "Yeah, let me listen. I'm going to listen to the lyrics." And I started playing in the kitchen. I was like, "Yeah, this is probably not the song that's going to be blared." It's blared in the Catholic school down here in Naples.
Oh, that's
so
probably
good for him,
yeah,
right?
for sure. I mean, I would imagine being the only ball that's not playing pro basketball, you got to find a way to make some money. So I'm not a hater, Bobby. I'm not a hater. So good for him.
No, not at all.
All right, Bobby. I don't know if you've noticed, Jazz aren't winning much this year. Okay, so I want to do a little Jazz off the top. We won't do a ton,
Sure.
and I've got to say, I'm more bullish on the potential of what they could be this year than I was either last year or the year before. Like I do think they're doing the right thing, and I actually applaud the way they're going about it. And Will's just like last night. They sat half their team, and Brooklyn's not a serious team, but the front office is trying to find a way to do this, and Will seems to be able to coach this team no matter who is on the roster. So while we're sitting here with a team that's 10-28 and a market of basketball fans that are not accustomed to losing, I actually think there are some good signs emerging.
No, I mean, and I think you could probably say that even with, kind of what's happening with Brooklyn too. I say this is that the most important thing that you can take away from this, and yes, there's pain alongside if I've lived through it. 12-70, I lived through it. That's a long year. Is to continually have your coach put a foundation in place. So when the time is right, and when is that time? Whether it be with your young players that continually play better and develop here, or if it's in a trade, or if it's in free agency, or when we get to the draft in June, that those guys, there's a system in place with that. I think that's the most important thing. And I said this to Sean Marks, their general manager. This was before they made the Schroeder trade and during Finney-Smith. And I said, listen, you have what we learned from Jordy Fernandez is that he can coach his rear end off, and there's a system in place. And that's the two. I think that's the two most important things that you can kind of take away from this. And Will is, listen, this is different than. Last 2 years you get to what were they? Probably 500-ish at the All-Star break, and that's the hardest part. To if you want to start tearing it down, then that's where it becomes very, very difficult here. So they're open eyes as far as what the end game here. Certainly with this draft coming up, but you're not throwing away games, but you're putting your guys in a position where the developmental part is key. Listen, Isaiah last night had we're not going to talk about the 8-second violation, but you learn from those things, right? Those are like learning experiences that guys have to go through here.
Yeah, I thought Colin Sexton was going to rip poor Isaiah's head off after that 8-second violation, but yeah, and I'm not going to go down the list and ask you what you think about each player because that ultimately time will tell. But I do want to kick the tires on a few of them because. Whenever I'll go on a radio show or a podcast and they want to talk about the Jazz, the question they ask me consistently is, who besides Lauri Markkanen will be on this roster when they're good again? Who's a keeper? Yeah. And honestly, prior to the start of the year, I would answer the question, I don't know. It's only Lauri at this point. And I'm kind of ready to put Walker next to Markkanen with the way he's played this year. Give me your thoughts on year 3 for Walker Kessler. Yeah,
I think there was so much of an expectation level going into last year, how he played, his rookie year, everything that came with it. That I don't want to say let down, but we were probably looking for him to maybe take another step last year, and it kind of plateaued a little bit here. I think this year, I think he's been extremely, extremely good on the court. Both sides. I think there's just more of more of a comfort level. I chuckle sometimes when I hear his name mentioned in like trade talks, and I'm like, the guy's really good. And he's on a rookie contract, and I think he might be part of this future here. So I like what I've seen from him. I think those are like those individual goals that we were kind of talking about, like what you can kind of take away from each guy. And it's like an open tryout this year, right? It's an open tryout for some of the like what Bryce has done, right? I thought he's played. I thought he's played really well. I think Isaiah has, as the season grows up, you can, you feel comfortable with him, running point as far as some of your younger guys. Cody's going to be, up and down. I think this is kind of a growing pains year, and I think whenever you're picked in the lottery, there's an expectation that you're going to be up there with rookie of the year, and that's not always the case.
No, it's not, and I do think he's really answered the bell. So I'll just expand that question to see if, and it's so hard. I mean, most of these players are still babies, and they've got a marathon in front of them. There have been some good Kyle Filipowski moments. I don't know what to make of Keontae. Sometimes I watch him, I'm like, yeah, I see it. And other times I'm like, well, he looks like Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson, and there's some redundancy on the I don't know. But outside of Markkanen, outside of Kessler, who else you think is kind of in this plan for the long term? It could be around when they're good again.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to, as I said, I think you have to like what you've seen with Bryce. I think he's kind of been more, certainly more consistent than prior years. I agree with you regarding Keontae. I want to see more, right? Like I want to see him on the court. I want to see him healthy. I want to, last year was kind of a mixed bag of a little bit of good and a bunch of whether it be turnovers or carelessness. I want to see more of that. So I'm not ready to kind of anoint these are the five guys. I think as I think the hardest thing with these rebuilds is that you got to have like a stud, man. You got to have a franchise level. And what we've seen in OKC and certainly this year in Detroit, like you have a franchise level guard, man, that can take you a long ways. It's almost like having you draft a guy in the NFL and you get a quarterback, and it's like he's our the kid Jane McDaniels in down in DC and everything like that. So that's where if I'm how this thing turns around in Utah, it's like you got to get one of those guys, right? You got to get one of those. I don't know if it's going to be in the draft or in a trade, and that's kind of that takes you a long way.
So you won't be surprised to learn that Duke basketball is receiving excellent ratings in our market this year as we're all watching. I mean, he's really fun, man. Cooper Flagg dropped 42 over the weekend.
Yep.
And there are a lot of names. There's the Ace Bailey kid. There's Dylan Harper, and we could keep going. So the hope is finally, Bobby, Lady Luck shines on us out here in Salt Lake. Finally, we don't move down. Maybe we move up, and maybe Cooper Flagg is alongside Markkanen and Kessler next year. That front court would be very popular in Utah, and I just won't elaborate on that anymore. But I'll ask you, what are you hearing about the type of pro that Cooper Flagg is expected to be if he stays healthy, puts in the work, and actually does fully develop?
Well, I saw him. I don't know if I told you this. I saw him a year ago down here in Fort Myers in the big tournament they have every year. This is when he was 16 and he was at Mount Verde. And I turned to a scout and I said he could play right now in the NBA. And the scout said to me, he reminded me of a younger Kevin Garnett. And it's really like, listen, the 42 points he scored over the weekend against Pitt. That's going to be the running headline on ESPN.com. I love what he can do defensively. I love his length. I love his instincts, his ability to guard multiple positions here. I think that will get him on. I mean, he'll play, but that will probably be more of his niche than a guy that's you're expecting to get 30 points from or 25 points. I think he's a multi-purpose player. He can play both. That's kind of been that was the takeaway from a year ago. That's still the takeaway now. I think. We get caught up a little bit earlier in the year. There were some games, certainly at the end where he turned the ball over. They're not asking him to do as much, as far as put the ball in his hands like that. So listen, he'll be one of two or one of three, probably top two. A lot of people have number one. Dylan Harper certainly at Rutgers. The tough part with Rutgers is that they're not going to make the tournament. As where they are. So you're likely, if you want to see him play now, in the next couple months, you better do it now, because the likelihood is you're not going to see him in March, because they're really not having a really good year.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And it's not a new thing in college basketball where a transcendent talent is playing for a team that can't just win. I mean, we could go over a bunch of examples. Ben Simmons, LSU, but we won't do that today. So, Bobby, since you and I last spoke, a rather surprising development, and Stephen A. Smith, your peer, was rather taken back when young A.J. DeBanza told him that he was taking his talents to Provo, Utah, to play his college basketball for Kevin Young and Brigham Young. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked you about Cooper, because I didn't know much about A.J. prior to this storyline, and I've watched a ton of him since, and he just appears to be generationally good. He and his dad said we're one and done, so he's getting $7 million to play 5 months of basketball for BYU. Ryan Smith, BYU alum, big-time donor. A lot of people are drawing a line between like, hey, you can develop BYU players and they'll play for the Jazz. I'm like, that's not really how that works, but okay. But tell me your reaction when you heard AJ was coming out here and what kind of player you think that he is.
Not surprising at all. I think the tea leaves were kind of pointing that way. I enjoyed Stephen A's reaction. I felt like saying, not everyone has to go to Duke or North Carolina or Kentucky or Kansas or some of these blue bloods. I think what they're building out there, I think, can be really good. I think when you talk to certainly our own Jonathan Gavoni and our draft guys, is that as much as 2025 is being built, 2026 draft class is probably better as far as from a depth standpoint. And certainly AJ is sitting up there. Certainly the boozers are there. I feel like that's a draft class where we're going to see a lot of former NBA players with their sons in that class. I think, listen, if Jazz fans are like, oh my God, we have to sit through another one of these years and stuff like that, that next, 20 to 26 class could be really, really good. And I think, certainly his versatility, his length, position of need, which is always important.
One more Jazz question, and I've got to say, I love having you on as a guest because I can actually get 10 minutes of Jazz conversation where other guys are like, hey, I'm not watching. I'm like, all right, I get it. But you are kind of a North Star for people when it comes to the trade deadline, and we're high speed ahead to that trade deadline. And I just wonder, are you hearing anything about the Jazz? Do you think they're active? And part of me, Bobby, believes they're built perfectly for what they're trying to do this year because you've got to pay players. Yeah. So I don't know if they can get a first for a vet. Maybe we see something. But what are you hearing about the Jazz prior to that February deadline?
Yeah, listen, I think when you look at it, it will always point to the three veterans, right? Whether it be Colin, Jordan, and John Collins, as far as, how do they fit in? What's the value of it? Listen, I think out of the three, Collins got value, right? Now, what's the value? Can you get another first out of it? I don't know based on, where the market is. I mean, remember this upcoming draft, Utah is part of a group of teams that have like 15 out of 30 picks, right? They're with OKC and Brooklyn, San Antonio, I think, is in there. So what's the value? What are you trying to do? Is Colin more valuable to you in the locker room with your young players? As I said, he still has another year. Jordan's, certainly been dealing with that plantar fascia. John's got, John could be of service, but the hard part is the rules make it extremely difficult when you're trading for a player who's earning more than, $20, $25 million. Like we're going to see that, like the guys in Washington, like Kuzma and Brogdon. I don't know. Those guys are probably not getting traded, at the deadline as much as probably the Wizards would like to do it and everything. So I think that's the tea leaves as far as from a draft standpoint. I mean, from a trade standpoint, is that I don't know. I mean, I'm not expecting as much action as we've seen in the past, just based on a third of the league is either in the apron or in a luxury tax. The inability to take back more money, the inability to aggregate contracts. There's a lot of different variances here with that. Like last week, I had a team exec calling me like, "Hey, I'm hearing something maybe with Zach LaVine in Utah." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? That doesn't make sense, right?" Like, so you got to flush out a lot of things as far as what's being talked about, out there. But, we'll see. The Jimmy Butler situation certainly has kind of hovered over everything. It's kind of quieted down a little bit here. But for Utah, I think the big name would probably be Colin because he's having a really good year. But as I said, he's on a really good contract, making $18-19 million, and he has another year left.
I like the term flush out, so let's flush out one more while we're in this space. And you know the deal. That's why I search, your writing out and other people that I trust, because if you jump on social, it's like, hey, NBA trade deadline primer, check it out. But there have been more than a few, and I can't give any credibility or credence to any of them, but since it's out there, I keep hearing because a lot of teams need centers, and Walker's good. I'm not saying Danny and Justin wouldn't take a phone call, but I don't know that they have any interest in moving on from this kid who's really evolved year 3, as we already talked about.
Yeah, listen, I think you take a phone call and listen, unless you have Curry or LeBron or somebody Giannis and stuff, some of these upper echelon guys, Shea, you take a phone call on everyone, and you just basically hear it out and you add it to your big board or your whiteboard, and some things make sense, some things you circle back to when you get closer to February 6th here. But I will say this. I'm 15 teams into my big trade guide that I put out at the end of January. This is probably the toughest year. I mean, the most difficult year as far as from a writing standpoint, just because there's not as much juice out there, right? Like you're trying to look at different angles and everything like that, and it's hard to come by.
Yep. No, well said. Since you brought up the Jimmy Butler thing, I know nobody knows, but he is the name that everybody's talking about, and I hear a different team every week. Memphis, I think, was out there for a minute. Golden State, Phoenix, who needs to do something. But how does it play out? I mean, you don't mess with Pat Riley. You just don't. And he tried. He got sat. So what's the end game here? Because, Bobby, as you know, there are several reasons that make sense for Miami just to not make a move. So I'm not really sure how this plays out. What do you think?
Yeah, listen, they're not going to trade. They're not going to trade for Bradley Beal. Like, I will go on the record and say that ain't happening. They're not taking back what is left. And Bradley Beal has done a nice job in Phoenix, but he's not a $53-54 million player. So it makes no sense for Miami to go about in that direction here. I think how it works out is that Jimmy Butler returns from this suspension. And listen, this is all up to Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler returns from the suspension at the end of the week. He plays out the year. There's no trade at the deadline. And then he opts into his contract at the end of the year, and both sides work out a trade in the offseason because there's more flexibility as far as when you can go. The rules get a little bit looser as far as because the money starts to increase with the salary cap. And I think that's what happens. Now, there's a big asterisk next to that, and it's a wild card because I don't know how Jimmy Butler reacts when he comes back from the suspension on Friday. And if he doesn't act right, the Heat are just going to suspend him again. I mean, that's the reality of it here. And I said it over the weekend. Miami needs Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler needs Miami. If Jimmy Butler wants another contract out there, he needs them, and he needs to be on the court playing at a high level.
Well said. All right, let's move over here. A couple of minutes left, then I'll set you loose. I always appreciate your time. Year 2, Donovan Mitchell. Jazz makes some good moves. Dennis brings in Ricky Rubio. Joe Ingles becomes a player that nobody thought he could. Gobert pops as this defensive stopper, and the Jazz go to the playoffs, and they beat OKC, and Donovan is their primary offensive option. And I remember thinking and saying on air, this is such good news that a year 2 player now has playoff experience. This will pay off in 5, 6, 7 years. And it is, but it's in Cleveland, right? So how real is it? Because he seems to be maturing. He did an interview a couple weeks ago where he's like, hey, guys, I'm playing defense now. And all of us are like, thanks, dude. But you got to respect what he's doing. And they're 33-5, man. How much of a threat are they, I guess I'll say, to the Celtics?
They're a threat. No, listen, a threat. I mean, I said on SportsCenter after that game, and I said probably Cavalier fans don't want to hear this, but listen, Boston's still a favorite, right? I mean, just based on what happened last year here, but you should take Cleveland much more serious than you did a year ago because they have done a really good job with Donovan's minutes. Last year I thought he was dragging that leg, that knee at the end in the Boston series, and certainly in that Orlando series. They're managing his minutes. I mean, he's right around 30, 31 minutes and stuff, which is huge. And then you saw in the OKC game, he scored 11 points. He doesn't have to be Superman, right? Mobley has taken a huge step in his development. Garland, Allen, they've got nice lifts off the bench with LeVert. They finally got Strus back. Ty Dromes played really well, and so it's more of a balanced team than it was the Donovan Mitchell we saw trying to put up 50 because he needs to win on the road at Orlando here, like we did last April. So I just think it's a maturation. It's evolving as far as for him because he realizes that he does not have to be the guy, and I think certainly. Kenny Atkinson has done a nice job there, but I could also say that JB Bickerstaff did a nice job because look at what JB's doing in Detroit. I mean, that's one of the great stories of the NBA right now here. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of how guys mature, whether it be in their 8th or 9th year.
All right, Bobby, before I set you loose, we'll end with this. A lot of conversation about how many good teams there are this year and how there's parity all over the place. Are we just simply going to end with OKC and Boston in the final? And if not, who gets in OKC's way out this way?
Yeah, they still scare me a little bit. I mean, I really like what they've done. And we haven't even seen, Chet's been out and Caruso's been out a big chunk of games. It scares me a little bit. And a couple of the marquee games, whether it be, I guess, we put the NBA Cup up there against Milwaukee and then that Cleveland game, it it turned south for both those games here. So that scares me a teeny bit here. But if you're saying it, then who is it in the West, right? Like can it be Denver? Is Denver going to go, they've played really well of late here. Do you trust Houston? Probably not, in a big setting. Memphis, if they're all healthy, what do they do at the deadline? Maybe they make a move to try to add another player here. So I think, certainly, I think it's probably more. I would say it's probably. I don't want to put OKC, Boston right away. I mean, I'm not. What Cleveland has done is remarkable, and I think it's certainly a toss-up of them getting out of the East, and then certainly the West. I think some of it depends on what happens at the deadline, and but OKC will be the 1 seed here, and I think it'll be fascinating because one of those teams that we saw last year, whether it be Golden State or Phoenix or one of those teams, maybe San Antonio. We'll be playing them probably in the first round.
Well, Bobby, great stuff as always. We'll see what the trade deadline brings. And now it's time to lean into more pro basketball. So appreciate your time on a Monday. Have a great week. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Yep, you got it.
All right. Great Bobby Marks, ESPN front office insider. Spent a number of years in NBA front offices with the New Jersey Nets and others. He writes all their trade deadline primers. He did a really good piece recently on the teams in the best spots to add talent via draft capital over the next 4 or 5 years. The Jazz, I believe, were 4th. The first team on that list is Oklahoma City, unfortunately. Get him on Twitter at BobbyMarks42 is where you find him. All right, we're going to bring in Dunny. Coming up next, Brian Dunseth will stop by. There has been chaos in the world of Real Salt Lake. I don't know who is going to play for this team in attack. They did add a center back, I believe, recently. I don't know. I'm not the guy for this. Dunny is. We'll bring him in. 5 o'clock hour will be all college and pro football. We'll say goodnight for the Craig Smith Coaches Show live at Slackwater. And then we're going to bring you the Monday Night Football tilt between the Vikings and the Rams after the Craig Smith Coaches Show. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. about 90 minutes away from the Craig Smith Coaches Show. Utah men's hoops with its first Big 12 win of the season on Saturday. Following the conclusion of the Craig Smith Coaches Show live at Slackwater, we will bring you Monday Night Football. The final game of the wild card weekend is the Rams and the Vikings in Glendale. That game has been moved from Los Angeles as a result of the horrific fires in the greater Los Angeles area. But we'll take a break from our football and basketball conversation to welcome in the guy that can help us understand what's up. I'm not the guy for this, but Brian Dunseth is on a Monday afternoon. Dunny, happy Monday, my guy. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So, world traveling, right? You've been taking a little time off, as you should, during this time. I believe you've been traversing the world. How's the off season been for you?
Yeah, it's been good, man. It's been quick. We got away. We did a couple. I think we did like 15 days down in Cabo over the holiday break, and we're home for a couple days, and then we were down in Mesquite, Nevada, for my son Luca, my 6-year-old, having a tournament down there. So it was all right back to the mix, and I'm off for the U.S. men's national team coverage this weekend. I leave Thursday, but Saturday against Venezuela. McAnally and Diego Luna going to be a part of that, and then the following Wednesday against Costa Rica out in Orlando.
Oh, very nice. Good for you. Back at it. Well, glad you got some time off. Shout out to Luca. All right, man. Like a lot of people, I got the alert on my phone that RSL had moved on from Chicho Arango, saw that it was San Jose, saw the takeaway, and I just went, wait, what? Like, now there's a lot here, right? There's a lot of meat on this bone. And I'm of the opinion that last year's team with Andres on the wing and Chicho scoring goals and a bevy of other contributors for about 15, 16 games was as entertaining as any team we've had here. And Chicho was in the middle of a stretch that was as exciting as any striker that we've had here. That includes Sabo, and we could go down the list. But the suspension comes down, and I can remember talking to you shortly thereafter and people over the club, and there was this feeling like we just hope this does not derail the entire exciting stretch that we've just seen. Well, it appears, Dunny, that it did exactly that. So now that you have the ability to be a little bit retrospective and you've talked to some people, why did this go down? How did this go down? And why did they take what I perceive to be pennies on the dollar for such a talented yet mercurial player?
Yeah, I'll try my best, Spence, because much like you, caught completely off guard by the announcement that the Chicho was sent out to San Jose and linking up with Bruce Arena, and subsequently Joseph Martinez, the former league MVP and goal scorer from Atlanta United. He was down at Miami and up in Montreal. He just joined up as well with Bruce in San Jose. So Bruce Arena making some moves after returning to Major League Soccer after being unceremoniously pushed out of the New England Revolution. Yeah, listen, man, if you go to the 2024 stat page for Major League Soccer with regards to Real Salt Lake, it's got Chicho Arango on 17 goals, 12 assists. It's got Andres Gomez still up there with 13 goals, 9 assists. It's got Anderson Julio with 9 goals, 3 assists. Diego Luna had 8 and 12, and then Matt Crooks, 3 and 5. I mean, that my math isn't great from Cal State Fullerton, pass or fail, but that's 4 of your top 5 goal scorers are no longer in the building down in Sandy, Utah, or down in Harriman, depending on which part we're talking about. In a lot of ways, this is devastating. You go back a couple of summers ago, 18 months, and we're talking about Chicho Arango for $6 million coming from Mexico after his time at LAFC. And for the first time in a long time, and you referenced Saborio, we felt like here at Real Salt Lake, you have one of the most dynamic goal scorers in Major League Soccer, a guy that was familiar with the league and the necessity of the week in, week out grind. And the understanding that this was going to be one of the big focal points going forward that was supposed to put Real Salt Lake over the top. Fast forward 12 months, you got a guy who on 17 goals and I believe 10 or 11 assists was an MLS All-Star, was up for the MLS All-Star captaincy. And out of nowhere, the suspension hits. There was a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty surrounding the exact nature of the suspension. It still hasn't been clarified by either the player, the club, or even Major League Soccer. But the moment that suspension came down, you were right. There was major concern, especially with the correlation of the sale of Andres Gomez and $13 million coming over from Rennes. Where were these 30 goals going to come from? It came from goals by committee. I mean, Real Salt Lake has the unfortunate title of, being knocked out of the playoffs without losing a game, going to penalties against Minnesota and in both games losing and just being dumped out of the playoffs. And going into a question mark of the offseason with players' contracts and thinking about what the future was going to look like. But again, Spence, whether this was the player's decision that he was asking for a move, there were whispers that this was something that was better for he and his family to no longer be in Salt Lake. There was whispers potentially going back to Columbia. But for the price, $1.5 million and I think $1.4 million in general allocation money plus an international spot. To give context to this, Craig Weibel, former general manager at Salt Lake, currently in Seattle, sent $2 million general allocation money, international spot, and Leo Chu down to Dallas in return for Jesus Ferreira. And I would argue that Chicho Arango is a much, in terms of finances, would be at a bare minimum the same cost for a trade as what we saw Craig Weibel spend on Jesus Ferreira. So a big loss in terms of the goal scoring ability. You're talking about the club captain as well, leadership vacuum inside of that locker room, and still more questions as opposed to answers as to why exactly this was a move best for the player and his family to depart Salt Lake City.
So let's stay in the space for a moment. Your point about the compensation is well taken, and Kurt Schmidt is a smart soccer executive. So because of these dynamics, I have to imagine there was pressure potentially from the people that signed Kurt's checks to say, we need to get this done, and we need to get this done quickly, and we need to get it done before CONCACAF, which is next month. But that's such a horrible haul. And I know he's aging, right? I know he's a little bit older, and maybe his reputation has taken a hit because apparently he could be a little bit difficult to deal with, not just with Salt Lake, but also in Los Angeles. I can't speak to any of that. So I'm sure you've talked to some of the same people I have. Maybe there was some uncomfortable feelings from his family about staying here for certain reasons that will remain off air. But have you been able to uncover any reason as to why they decided to take what I perceive to be a really awful deal? They must have been up against a massive deadline, and it feels like they just made a phone call. It was like, who wants him? Okay, you can have him, even though we're not getting what we should in return for him.
Yeah, I mean, Spence, I talked to somebody associated with San Jose as a club, and I congratulated them because I thought it was a hell of a deal for them. I mean, $1.4 million in general allocation money in that spot in today's world is really not that much. And again, I'm not a math genius, but taking a wash on $4.5 million is a significant wash, considering you knew exactly what you were paying for 18 months ago. I would assume similar, that this was something that had to have been sanctioned. This wasn't going to be something that just Kurt Schmidt was making the decision upon. This would have had to have been a collaborative effort and agreement that from Pablo and his coaching staff, Kurt, Jason, and anybody else associated before it ran up the food chain to, the Blitzer hierarchy, Blitzer Smith hierarchy, and whoever ultimately is in charge of managing this club from their perspective, that you've got a lot of smart people walking away from a lot of significant money, especially in a window in which, you go back and think about the effective $17 to $18 million raised off sales during the summer transfer window, invested minutely with Diogo Gonçalves coming at the end of the summer transfer window, that not really working as quickly as we thought it was going to work out. And maybe that's a byproduct of Luna's development, being the MLS Young Player of the Year, and maybe Matt Crooks filling a role. But again, it's not just Chicho Arango, it's Anderson Julio, it's Andres Gomez, it's Matt Crooks. Those are a lot of goals departing. I mean, you're talking, I think, roughly 42 goals in all competitions that are no longer a part of this group. That's a big void. So, yeah, your assumption is well taken as something that I would agree upon as well. That if you're going to get this deal done for roughly 1.4 in general allocation money at this stage of the season, that you felt like you needed to make the decision because in my world that doesn't come close to the full valuation what a guy like Chicho Arango is capable of doing in Major League Soccer.
So I'm not sure, Dunny, I'll ever be like fully on board with we find young talent, we invest in young talent, we develop young talent, and then we sell good players. But I understand it, and Andres is proof of concept. So 13 mil potentially, I get it. I understand that. But tell me what you're hearing about Diego, who right now appears to be like such a necessity and a linchpin with the lack of creativity in that group. Is there a chance that he's gone prior to the start of the season?
No, I mean, there's nothing to suggest. And again, I'm not privy to those internal conversations, for fielding phone calls and interest. And again, I would always remind people that, a conversation about a player isn't an offer for a player. So theoretically, you never really truly know the intrinsic value of a player unless that, comes over in that email, that fax, whatever we're talking about to justify what a real offer looks like. And it's different, right? Fidel Barajas going for $5 million after costing $200,000 from Charleston Battery is more of a byproduct of a rule change down in Liga MX in Mexico, where they're putting higher value on Mexican international players or those that have dual Mexican international availability, because Major League Soccer has cashed in on some players that were highly overvalued by Liga MX versus what we've seen value internally in Major League Soccer. But yeah, with Luna in particular, listen, I think this January camp, I've got him as my tier one, number one player to keep an eye on, because I think his skill set and his ability, his mentality is something special. And I think after the season he just had, he could be one of the few players in this January camp that I think has a realistic opportunity to really impress Mauricio Pochettino in a manner that could see a more consistent basis of call-ups, similar to what we saw with Aiden Morris and Columbus Crew a year ago, who was with Diego making his international debut down in San Diego against Slovakia, turned that into a sale to Middlesbrough in the championship, and subsequently being more outside of that knee injury, having more of a role with Mauricio Pochettino's central midfield conversation. But as of right now, there's nothing to suggest that Diego Luna is the next one out the door. I think he's fully capable of earning himself significant interest, and inevitably, a couple of doors being knocked on or kicking the tires at least by teams over in Europe. But I could see that more in a summer transfer window interest as opposed to a January window.
So there's a report. The club has not announced it yet, but, I think it's just fair to say, and I'm not trying to be overly critical, the situation in goal felt untenable last year, where Zach was making some errors where you're like, dude, are there orange slices and fruit, snacks involved? And like so many weird gaffes from Zach, who's done it for a long time. Gavin ultimately gets the shot to win that job, and he didn't. He's young, he's got a lot of upside, but apparently Gavin is being moved on to a Danish club. So what is your understanding as far as what the plan is in goal for RSL this year?
Yeah, so it sounds like Gavin Beavers is going to be a part of the Blitzer umbrella, because the Blitzer Sports and Blitzer Sports Group also owns Brøndby over in Denmark, and that's where it sounds like that's going to be the landing spot. Tommy Boger, Tommy Snacks, as I call him, the best mustache in the game, has all the inside information from a soccer perspective, and he was the first to kind of really put this out there that Gavin was on his way. Now, we don't understand the full compensation. Is it a couple million? Is it only $1 million? I know there was whispers about interest from Newcastle United from the Premier League over the summer, but that didn't materialize into a true offer from what I understood at the time. More about, again, kicking the tires and seeing what the value potentially could have been for Real Salt Lake's desire and want. Listen, I think both he and Zach, we're given the opportunity to, I think, and I feel like this is the biggest question coming out of Leagues Cup and that suspension, and it coincided with the Chicho conversation, is you've got two goalkeepers that couldn't figure out a way to consistently play at a high enough level that didn't justify Pablo and their coaching staff to have significant questions about either goalkeeper. And listen, you were coming out 12 months ago, Spence, from Maxime Crepeau, John McCarthy, some significant goalkeepers being available in the internal free agent market, and Real Salt Lake not interested in making a run at either of them. or competing for the signature of either of them. Zach's been a solid goalkeeper. I've always thought that in terms of competition, you could go out in the market or either internationally or intra-league and find someone that could compete and make both goalkeepers better. But, there was a pathway for Gavin to be the number one. He couldn't hold on to it. He was given, I would say, 2 to 3 legitimate opportunities to be the number one goalkeeper. And whether it was a crisis of confidence, 3 games in 7 days, or, just not proving that he was the undisputed number one, that didn't mean that there wasn't significant interest because of his performances at the U19, U.S. under-19 team level. And that's what I've been told led to this Brøndby opportunity. So it does sound like there's a potential for a new goalkeeper coming through the door. I've been told that it sounds like there's a potential for that announcement coming soon. And hopefully this is a guy that isn't just competing for the number one spot, that potentially is for the number one spot, because I feel like since the loss of Nick Raimondo, we've had David Ochoa, who was a Western Conference final winning goalkeeper. For whatever reason, he's gone out the door. Now you're going to lose another young, dynamic, high potential, high threshold goalkeeper. And you've got to figure out what's happening from that position. Are you developing, or are you finding yourself an undisputed number one? So hopefully that has been answered by the time, I guess day one started today. By the end of the week, and you start thinking about we're right around the corner from the start of CONCACAF Champions Cup.
And that's kind of where I want to go next, Dunny, because as you reference, like the players are gathering, and I'm just, you have Mark Zook, who I think, has a chance to be really, really good, to be honest. I mean, with a full preseason, you've got, Diogo Gonçalves, who certainly has skill. It never fully, came together last year. I'm just looking at the attacking group, like, what exactly are we doing here? Of course, Diego's still around. So there's some bright, I guess I'll say, skilled midfielders, but who's scoring goals? Like, and do you think there's some reinforcements on the way, maybe as early as the next few weeks before their first CONCACAF match?
Yeah, I mean, they went through the MLS Combine and through the MLS College Draft and picked up a pretty sizable amount of players. Now, the one thing we never know is, are you finding a Jasper Loffelson or an Emeka Eneli in this draft? We talk about Diego Luna being involved with Mauricio Pochettino's side. Emeka Eneli is also down in Orlando and Fort Lauderdale right now with the U.S. team. And that's an incredible story of a young man that, the path less traveled, not picked to go pro, going through the college game and working himself through, the early part of what his future as a professional soccer player looked like, and ultimately rewarded with a starting spot and playing so well that he was in contention for a lot of these conversations, including the All-Star game, but ultimately with Diego coinciding the call up to the U.S. men's national team. So there is still value in the college game. You hope at this stage that there's enough of a philosophical approach as well as a professional layout, that the identification process through the academy system from the 15-year-olds to the 19-year-olds, that you're creating a pathway through the academy to the Real Monarchs to the first team, and there's a viable option there. And we see guys like Xavier Gozo, who consistently are being called into the U.S. under-17s, 18s, 19s, and now 20s, that there's hopefully a pathway, if he's good enough for the U.S. under-20 national team, that he's good enough to see some significant minutes. Not too long ago, we were celebrating a guy like Axel Kai, and Axel Kai hasn't come close to really breaking through at the highest level. So in this offseason, you trade, a couple of players in particular. You're getting Sam Junka, who's a defender, who's got some MLS experience. You got Tyler Wolff coming over from Atlanta United. That's Josh Wolff's oldest son, who's had some pretty good minutes in Major League Soccer so far. You got Elias Manuel, who came over from the New York Red Bulls, who was started on the bench in the MLS Cup final and came in while they were chasing the game to try to get themselves back in. And then the announcement today of the loan of Kobe Henry coming in, who is a dynamic young center back with a high threshold, who started off in Orange County in the second division here in the United States and was over at RIM. And so you're going to give him a run out on a loan option. But outside of that, I think you're still waiting for these announcements, and the timing and the league and making sure all the passport and the visa situations get all laid out. That takes a little bit more time than anybody's willing to really admit. But, yeah, to your point, whether you're talking about Gonzalez, you're talking about Marchuk, you're talking about any of these other players, Lachlan Brook, at the end of the day, again, there's a lot of goals that are missing, and a short amount of time for Pablo and his staff. I mean, and here's the other thing, Spence, to assume that they're just going to roll out the same formation, or at least the tactical approach, becomes up for debate because you've lost so many different players. And because this system is the players fitting the system? Is the system fitting the players? And that's going to be the challenge for Pablo and his coaching staff, especially with kind of the leadership vacuum that I would say in particular you lose from Chicho and a guy like Matt Crooks walking out the door.
All right, Donnie, before I say you lose, I mean, look, they set a club record for points a year ago. They set a club record for goals scored a year ago. They were ousted in the first round of the playoffs. What gives? Why the fire sale? And as a guy that has been in a number of locker rooms, what does that say to you about the things that behind the scenes that were potentially going on that maybe none of us really knew? I don't know, man. For a season that had so many victories, it seems odd to more or less break it down to the studs. So why do you think they're doing it?
Yeah, and again, I'm not privy to the financial ramifications. Obviously, I don't have the insight of exactly the breakdowns of how they're functioning, because there's a bunch of different options in terms of designated players, U22 initiative players, target allocation money. There's a bunch of expendable cash, supplemental cash that can be invested by ownership based on how you build your roster and the structure. But I'll be as honest and transparent as I possibly can as just an Apple TV analyst in this situation. I'm shocked. I got to be honest with you. I'm shocked that whatever's happened in Chicho and his family's world, that this was a necessary move at this time of his career and at his tenure with the club, because you don't go from being club captain and 17 goals in a season to all of a sudden have so much havoc surrounding you that this moment is the moment that you decide with your family's agreement that you got to get out of Salt Lake. I completely understand Andres Gomez and pulling that trigger on his move in the summer and effectively coming just over 13 million in from Ren. So those are planning purposes, and I think that was part of the Diego Gonzalez. Anderson Julio, I'm not aware of exactly what his number or his cap hit was, with either triggering an extension or whatever was left on his deal, because I'll gently remind everybody that usually the backside of deals are, as you know, Spence, in any sport, pretty heavily burdening for clubs, depending upon what the outlay of the statistics look like. And then Matt Crooks is more of a family issue for as far as I'm concerned, and from what I've been told, that it was going to be difficult for him to stay here for more than 1 year, based on what was going on with his wife and his family and the desire to stay back in England. So there's certainly circumstances, again, as you know, in any walk of life, any sport, that clubs have to deal with. But I did not have this on my winter off-season bingo card, that this club was going to be torn apart in the manner in which it was. And so significantly transitioning in a time where I thought that the potential going into the off-season was making a decision on maybe 1, 2, 3 players max, but certainly not losing 40-plus goals in one fell swoop of one offseason in Major League Soccer.
My goodness. All right, buddy, next time somebody forwards me an article when you're asked about the first broadcasting job that you've ever had, please make sure that it includes that the idiot that I heard talking that knew nothing about soccer also petitioned to get me on his show. I just want you to include that. The next time you're asked about it, I just want you to include that piece, please.
Yeah, I just want everyone to know Spence and Trey were the first 2 people after I retired, quote unquote, that I joked around and I said, let me know when you guys want someone who knows what they're talking about. And that was the start of my glorious involvement in the media. What was that? Maybe May or June of 2006.
Somewhere there, somewhere right in there. Yeah, for sure.
We go long. We go way back.
Yes, sir. All right, brother. Thanks for the time, man. Be good. We'll chat soon.
Appreciate you.
Ryan Dunseth, Apple TV. You can hear him on the call for a lot of the U.S. men's national team matches as well. And I think Dunny put it really well. If you are an RSL fan, and I'm aware that a few of you are not, hear from you from time to time, this is a wild approach for a team that it appeared to have a lot of really good things going for it. But I guess only time will tell. Kurt's a smart guy. Ownership has shown the willingness and ability to write some checks, and Pablo at this point probably deserves the benefit of the doubt. CONCACAF a few weeks away. The guys are the lads, here for the lads. They're gathering right now for camp. All right, 3 hours down. We've got 1 hour to go. We're going to do some college and pro football in the 5 o'clock hour. We'll say goodnight in time for the Craig Smith Coaches Show, live at Slackwater tonight. If you want to head down and say hello to Coach Smith and, of course, Bill, the voice of the Utes. After that is done, around 7 o'clock, we bring you the completion and the majority of tonight's Monday Night Football game. Vikings-Rams. Winner gets the Eagles coming up on Sunday. So keep it here on a Monday on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? Drive at 5 time. Your commute home on a Monday afternoon starts right now. Congrats. It's always good to get Monday over with, right? Happy Monday to you. Hopefully you had a great weekend and you're off to a great start to that work week. It is chilly. It is cold. It is cloudy because it's January. And that's kind of the deal, but as it is every day, it's good to have you along for the ride. My name is Spence Checketts. I host this show, Porter Larson producing. We're going to have Monday Night Football rolling your way coming up after the Craig Smith Coaches Show. So, Utah men's basketball, they got their first Big 12 victory over the weekend against Oklahoma State. Here in Salt Lake at the Huntsman Center, they're on the road at TCU this week, and then they're home against BYU on Saturday. That is a red out. So keep in mind, grab that red. If you don't have any, head up to the team store, check out their options. Wear red on Saturday. It's a 7 o'clock tip. Here, you can hear the game here on this station, so you're going to hear from Bill Riley and Craig Smith coming up in just under an hour from now. Then after the conclusion of the Craig Smith Coaches Show, we will turn you over to the NFC Wild Card Playoffs, move to Arizona due to the wildfires in the greater Los Angeles area between the Vikings and the Rams. The Vikings are a 2.5-point favorite. That over-under is 47.5. Money line is on the Rams plus 120 if you are in to such things. News broke earlier today that Mike McCarthy will not return as the Cowboys coach in 2025. The rumors are the New Orleans Saints and the Chicago Bears are interested in interviewing Mike McCarthy. No news on who the Dallas Cowboys are going to go after, although Adam Schefter reported they might want to talk to Troy Aikman, who will be on television tonight next to Joe Buck for a little Monday Night Football. So we'll see if they go in that direction. Mike Vrabel has been officially announced as the next head coach of the New England Patriots. Still a lot of jobs out there. If anything falls before or drops before we say goodnight at 6 o'clock, we will, of course, bring it to you. Fun weekend of pro football. Wild card round, probably my favorite. Divisional round should be fun. The winner of the game tonight will take on the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, playoffs are here. I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's very simple. It's a little bit different than some of the other apps if you've ever tried to use them. You don't have to worry about what does the spread mean? What's over under? What's the money line? All you do is pick the players and more or less on their stat projections. And if you win it, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash on Prize Picks. So tonight, for example, Vikings-Rams. Something like Sam Darnold, more or less than 2.5 touchdown passes. Puka Nacua, more or less than 95.5 receiving yards. Something like that. You just pick more or less. If they're both right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. And they're giving away free money. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks run your game all season long. So, weekend that was in pro football. You know, some interesting takeaways. A lot of local players making some big-time plays. Bobby Wagner, that dude does not age at all. Really fun story if you're a fan of the Washington Commanders. They were able to go down in Tampa Bay as the underdog and get it done. Jaden Daniels, it continues to be so wild, man. Like, he was a Pac-12 kid before transferring to LSU and didn't really show much of. It's not like he was bad. He was dynamic. He was exciting at Arizona State. But as a rookie quarterback, to get that done, and obviously that's an organization that's really on the up and up after a number of years of futility. As a Jets fan, perhaps I can take some solace there. But I thought that was a really exciting Sunday night game. Talked about this a little bit earlier. I get the trepidation surrounding the Eagles. Like, I understand that when you see that, you know, Jalen Hurts has potentially, it depends on your opinion. I think Saquon's probably the best back in the league. Derrick Henry might have some things to say about that. But if Saquon Barkley's not the best running back in pro football, he's probably one of 2. And Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, as far as a 1-2 punch, a wideout, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better 1-2 punch in the entire league. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, we could probably go down the list and find something comparable. Dallas Goedert, when healthy, a very dynamic, good tight end. We saw him catch a touchdown pass. A couple of straight arms en route to the end zone. So I understand, as an Eagles fan, if you see that you won the turnover margin by 4 and you were up 16-10 in the fourth quarter and your quarterback only threw 130 for 131 yards with a bevy of weapons, I can get why you're left wanting a little bit more. But I still think they've got a legitimate shot to win the whole thing. And I've liked Jalen Hurts more than most. And ultimately, I know when you look at the numbers, it doesn't stack up with some of the better quarterbacks in pro football. But when their defense is healthy, and unfortunately it's not fully healthy right now, and Jalen just kind of finds a rhythm, I feel like they're right up there with some of the best teams in pro football. I wouldn't bet money for them to win the Super Bowl. And Nakobe Dean is going to be out for the rest of the playoffs. They're a really dynamic linebacker. He hurt his knee, so that, of course, hurts them. And I think a lot of people look at kind of the quirky nature of Nick Sirianni, and he's kind of a weird dude. You know, that introductory press conference, I kind of felt bad for him. He was clearly nervous. And I think Eagle fans were a little bit taken back at how kind of awkward that was. So maybe there's something there because he's not necessarily thought of as the play caller or the offensive coach of an Andy Reid or, Jim Harbaugh, and the Ravens are rolling right now. It feels like this could be Josh Allen's year. We have not seen up close and personal, the teams with byes in round one, namely the Lions and the Chiefs. The Texans will be at Arrowhead coming up on Saturday. That's going to be a 2:30 kickoff time, and that one's going to be on ESPN or ABC. Fox will have the night game, and that is Jaden Daniels and the Commanders going to Ford Field in Detroit to take on the Lions. And then we'll find out who the Eagles play tonight. Eagles will play the winner of the Rams and the Vikings on Sunday at 1 in Philly. And then your later game, and it's kind of early afternoon, which is kind of nice. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The Mountain Time Zone might be the best time zone to consume sports. I grew up back east where oftentimes, let's take a little trip down memory lane. ESPN used to do something called Big Monday, and it's when Utah and BYU were in the WAC. And those games, the basketball games, were televised at 10 o'clock local. And I grew up going to BYU basketball camp and Rick Majerus' basketball camp at Utah, and, of course, have ties to both schools, and so I always wanted to watch them play. That was a midnight start for your guy growing up, and you're not done watching until 2 a.m., 2:30. So Ravens-Bills is 4:30 local time on Sunday afternoon at Orchard Park. That's going to be on CBS, and the Bills are only Baltimore is now a 1-point favorite on the road, and the over-under is 51.5. That game is going to be a lot of fun. So tonight will be the final game of the wild card weekend. A little Monday Night Football once again has been moved to Arizona due to the wildfires in Los Angeles. Little local flavor of Puka Nacua, who has had an insanely exciting sophomore campaign after that record-setting rookie season. And so we'll kind of see how this goes down. Again, the winner will take on the Philadelphia Eagles. Utah Jazz got a win last night. We did a little NBA earlier with Bobby Marks. And Bobby's the guy that ultimately really is kind of a North Star for all of us in the media to try to understand what could potentially happen come trade deadline time, which is the second week in February, I believe. We're about 4 weeks away, maybe a little bit less than that. And I thought Bobby's take was pretty sound. I mean, it does feel like most of these young players probably are safe and will not be moved on from. I continue seeing all these reports that there are teams interested in Walker Kessler. I just can't imagine, after the way Walker has kind of evolved this year in his third year, that the Jazz have the appetite to move on from him. I mean, there isn't a player in the NBA that is not in that rarefied air, the stratosphere that contains the Jokic's, the Doncic's, Giannis. Of course, LeBron. You're not trading LeBron. I don't think you're trading Steph Curry. Durant's changed teams 5 times for a guy that's good. That's still odd. But there's a very small group of players where if you're the general manager and you get a phone call, you hang up before they even could continue. So if somebody wanted to offer something enticing for Walker, maybe, I don't know, man. I just feel like Walker this year has played himself up to the level of a player where I believe he'll be around here for the next iteration of really good Jazz basketball. And then the rest of these young players who we still have to learn about. We did see Bryce come back last night, Bryce Sensabaugh. He's starting to show a little something. He was 5 of 13 last night, not his finest shooting performance. He had 16 points in 27 minutes. The front office sat like half the team, including Walker Kessler, including Larry Marketing, including Keontae George and John Collins, and the Jazz were still able to win. Now, Brooklyn is very unserious this year. They're kind of doing what the Jazz are doing. They're trying to enter the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. I mean, Ben Simmons plays 30, 35 minutes a night. Played pretty well last night, 14 points, 96 boards. But the Jazz were able to get a win. And it was another example, and Isaiah Collier is the one I'll focus on here, of recently the Jazz finding a way to stay competitive in games down the stretch and getting these young players valuable experience in competitive games against NBA teams is actually a really underrated thing because there will be no playoff basketball for them this year. And as I've talked about, year 2, Donovan Mitchell for the Utah Jazz, when they beat Oklahoma City in the playoffs, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, Dennis Lindsey making some good moves, Ricky Rubio added to the mix, Ingles evolving, Gobert popping as a defensive player of the year and an all-star. Donovan was the main offense initiator. He was the ball in hand, make a play happen guy in the playoffs, and that's a different deal. And when you get that experience as a second-year player, it will pay off at some point. And that's why a lot of us who have covered the Jazz for a long time, been around the team for a long time, we were so excited about the potential of what Donovan could be and thought that that experience would pay off in 4 or 5 years. Well, it has. But in Cleveland, not in Salt Lake. So close games, competitive games where, a player like Isaiah Collier can kind of drive the car and be the guy who's your primary initiator, even though it's not playoff basketball. It's all you can do. And Will continues to coach this team up pretty good. All right, coming up on the other side, you're not going to want to miss it. One of the best to ever do it. All right, final segment of the show on a Monday. Going to turn it over to Bill O'Reilly, Craig Smith, the Craig Smith Coaches Show, live at Slackwater. Coming up on the other side, then following the conclusion of Craig Smith Coaches Show, shout out to the Utah men's basketball team for getting that first Big 12 win over the weekend against Oklahoma State, road game against TCU, home game against BYU. We will send it over to the Vikings and the Rams. Monday Night Football in Glendale, Arizona. It has been moved from Los Angeles because of the wildfires. Minnesota 2.5-point favorite. The winner plays the Philadelphia Eagles, so stay tuned for that. Who you like tonight? Vikings 2.5, Rams a little bit of an underdog. The line was closer when it was in L.A. Now the Rams have lost the home field advantage. What do you think?
Yeah.
I'm gonna ride with my guy McVay if you want to take the others. We could double or nothing our bet because you're in the hole right now.
The problem is I'm leaning towards the Rams, so I'm with you there. But moving it out of your home stadium the week of a game day after you've played all season long to get that home field advantage, that's got to be some sort of effect on the Rams. Now, to be clear, both teams had to travel to Phoenix to play this game, but yeah, I wonder what effect that has, and it has affected the line a little bit, and I think it may affect the game a little bit. Come down to the wire, but leaning LA.
All right, okay. Well, we'll find a game that we disagree upon throughout the course of the postseason and try to make this right. All right, I'll be on television tonight with 2 Emmys, 2 Pelotons, Dave Fox, 10:35 KMYU. I can't wait.
I can't wait either.
I know, man. So stay tuned for that. Got to run home. I'm a single dad. Got to get the puppy out. Got to get the dog out. So check that out tonight, 10:35 KMYU. What comes our way, Porter, on a Tuesday edition of the show?
The aforementioned Dave Fox hops on the program on a Tuesday.
Wonderful, exciting.
Mike Yam talking some NFL.
Sweet. I'm excited about that one, yeah.
NBA Daily Assist with our guy Tim McMahon.
Also nice.
And then from there, we will have, for the first time in quite some time, sound from the University of Utah. I will be up on the Hill all morning long, chatting with Kyle Whittingham, Morgan Scally, Jason Beck. So we'll hear from all of those guys and react to the sound from the press conference tomorrow.
Very rare midwinter Utah football presser, so we'll get you all the sound from that we can. So make us a part of your Tuesday. All right, special thank you today on the Monday show to Zach Moss, Stevenson Sylvester, Bobby Marks, and Brian Dunseth for any of the sound you may have missed from the show. You have some options. Website, ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app. Take us on the go. For what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, we have a podcast. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. While you're over there, subscribe, rate, review, say nice things, give us all the stars say nice things in the comments and give us all the stars you can. That would make sense. Sorry, 4 hours of radio, gets a little weird. That's Porter. I'm Spence saying goodnight. Craig Smith Coaches Show. Coming up next, then it's Monday Night Football. You don't need to turn that dial anywhere. Keep it right here. Talk to you tomorrow on ESPN 700.